Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back in time. Not to a grand battlefield or a glittering royal court, but to a quiet, dimly lit room, to witness a moment that is both universally human and historically complicated. We're exploring a world where a woman's body, and one of its most fundamental functions, became a commodity. It's a story about class, sacrifice, and the often hidden transactions that kept the gears of society turning. You might find that your modern sensibilities don't quite align with the choices people had to make, and frankly, you'd probably not survive the first day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Tell me if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're in and what time it is for you. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you're aware of is the smell. It's a thick, heavy mixture of damp earth, burnt straw, and a lingering, metallic scent of childbirth. A single, sputtering tallow candle does its best to fight off the shadows in your small, one-room hut. But it's a losing battle. The floor beneath your thin mattress, really just a sack filled with straw on a wooden platform, is cold, packed dirt. You can feel a draft whispering through a crack in the wattle and daub wall, a cool reminder of the world outside. You shift, and a dull ache radiates from deep within you. It's a tired, hollowed-out feeling, but then, a small noise from the bundle beside you makes you forget your own discomfort. You turn your head, your movements slow and deliberate. There, wrapped in a piece of worn, coarse linen, is your child, your newborn. He is so impossibly small, a tiny bean of soft skin and downy hair. As you watch, his face scrunches up, his little mouth opening in a silent "oh" before he lets out a thin, reedy cry. The sound cuts through the quiet of the hut, sharp and demanding. It's a cry that says, "I am here, I am hungry, I need." And in that moment, the immense, crushing weight of reality settles upon you. This isn't just a beautiful new life, it's another mouth to feed. You glance around the sparse hut. There's a rough-hewn table with a half-empty bowl of yesterday's pottage, a small sack of oats in the corner, a few shriveled vegetables in a basket. That's it. Your husband is a tenant farmer, and the last harvest was meager. The rent for this small patch of land, owed to the lord of the manor, has already claimed most of it. Winter is a hungry wolf, and its breath is already cold on the back of your neck. This was the grim reality for the vast majority of the population in the 18th century. Infant mortality was staggeringly high. In some parts of rural France and England, it wasn't uncommon for 1 in every 3 infants to die before their first birthday. For families like yours, living on the knife's edge of subsistence, a simple fever or a bout of dysentery could be a death sentence. Life was cheap because death was everywhere. Your child cries again, a little louder this time. You draw him closer, guiding him to your breast. There's a strange, almost miraculous comfort in the act, a biological imperative unfolding just as it has for mothers for millennia. But as you feel the first tugs, a cold knot of fear tightens in your stomach. Your milk is coming in. Yes, but milk is not made from love or air. It's made from food. The more you feed him, the more you must eat. And there simply isn't enough to go around. Every drop of milk he takes is a drop of strength you lose. Strength you need to work the fields, to cook, to simply survive, to keep him safe. You've wrapped him tightly in swaddling bands, a practice that seems strange to us now. This wasn't just for warmth. There was a widespread and quite serious belief that if an infant's limbs weren't bound straight, they would grow crooked. Even more curiously, it was thought to protect them from themselves from scratching their own eyes out, and, in a whisper of folklore that still clung to the countryside, from being snatched by fairies and replaced with a changeling, it also had a more practical, if sad, purposeless swaddled baby as a neat, manageable package. In a cramped, dirty hut, a baby could be safely hung from a hook on the wall, away from the filth and vermin on the floor. As your child quiets, his hunger momentarily sated, you're left alone with your thoughts in the flickering darkness. How did mothers cope? Historians still debate the emotional landscape of parenthood in this era. Some argue that the high rate of infant mortality forced parents to maintain a certain emotional distance, a form of self-protection against the almost inevitable grief to come. They suggest parents wouldn't even name a child, or would reuse a name from a sibling who had died, not fully investing their love until the child had passed the perilous first year. But other scholars push back against this, pointing to diaries and letters that are filled with profound, heart-wrenching sorrow over the loss of a child. For you, sitting in this hut, it's not an academic debate. It is a terrifying paradox. The fierce, primal love you feel for this tiny creature is matched only by the crippling fear that you will be unable to provide for him. His cry is the sound of life. But it's also the sound of a countdown, a constant reminder of a debt you don't have the currency to pay. The silence in the hut stretches, thick and heavy like a wool blanket. Your child has drifted into the shallow, twitching sleep of a newborn. For a moment, there is peace. But it's a fragile thing, easily broken. And broken it is, by the sound of the rough wooden door groaning on its leather hinges. You tense up, pulling the thin blanket higher around your shoulders. Your husband isn't due back from the fields until dusk. A woman's silhouette fills the doorway, blocking the pale afternoon light. It's Bellady, from the neighboring cottage. She is older, her face a roadmap of hard winters and lean summers, but her eyes are sharp. She shuffles inside, bringing with her a gust of cool air and the scent of wood smoke from her own hearth. Hush now, she whispers, her voice raspy, though you haven't said a word. She glances at the sleeping bundle beside you and a knowing, almost pitying, look crosses her face. Day boy. You nod, your throat too tight to speak. She pulls over the single three-legged stool, the only other piece of furniture in the room, and sits down, her knees cracking. A strong one, I hope. It's a hard world for a weak boy. She doesn't mean it cruelly. It's just a statement of fact, as unadorned as the dirt floor beneath her feet. She leans in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I have news from the village. It could be the answer to a prayer you haven't even dared to speak. You look at her, a flicker of something as it hope igniting in your chest. News in the village is usually about a sick cow or a rise in the price of salt. It's never good. An agent is here, she continues, her eyes gleaming, from the city, from Paris. The name itself sounds foreign and impossibly grand, a place of myth. A GS looking for a nurse, for a marquis' son, to pay. She pauses for dramatic effect, letting the weight of her words settle in the small room. They are offering 25 livres a month, and a bonus upon completion. Food, lodging, everything. The number hangs in the air. Nonsensical. 25 livres a month. Your husband, in a good year, might clear 50 livres for the entire year's labor, after the Lord takes his share. What she's describing is not just money, it's a different life. It's the kind of sum that could buy a cow, repair the roof, guarantee food through the winter and the next. It's security, a concept as luxurious and out of reach as the silk dresses the ladies in Paris are said to wear. A wave of dizziness washes over you. The hope is now a roaring fire. You could do it. You are strong. You are healthy. The timing is perfect. Your milk is fresh. And then, as quickly as it came, the fire is doused by an icy dread. You look down at the tiny, seeping form beside you. His little chest rises and falls with each breath. The agent isn't looking for a woman. He is looking for a source of milk, a source that must be exclusive. He has conditions. Of course, Elodie says, her voice carefully neutral. She has seen this play out before. The nurse must be robust. Good teeth, clear skin, a calm temperament. She looks you up and down, appraising you like livestock at a market. You'll do. You have good color in your cheeks. This was the strange, folk science of the time. The qualities of a nurse were believed to pass through her milk directly into the child. If you were nervous or melancholic, the baby would become fretful. If you were coarse and ill-tempered, the child would grow up to be vulgar. And most importantly, you had to look the part of a healthy, bountiful provider. A bit of plumpness was a sign of abundance, a visual promise of rich, life-sustaining milk. In a world of scarcity, your full figure was your resume. The process was as simple as just showing up. The agent already mentioned, often called a manurer, was a professional procurer. This was a business. These men were the middlemen in a vast, sprawling industry connecting the rural poor with the urban rich. A manurer would come to a village, often tipped off by a local priest or midwife about recent births. He would then conduct a preliminary inspection. He'd check your hands, your eyes, your gums. He might even ask for a small sample of your milk, examining its color and consistency, rubbing it between his fingers. It was a humiliating, deeply invasive process where your body was assessed for its commercial viability. He will want to see you tomorrow, Elodie says, standing up to leave. She places a rough hand on your shoulder. It's a great honor, a great opportunity. An honor and opportunity. You stare at the wall, at a crack that looks like a weeping eye. Historians still argue about this very moment. Were you a passive victim, a desperate woman with no other path, pushed by poverty into an unbearable choice, or were you an active agent, making a calculated, albeit heart-wrenching, economic decision for the good of your family? Some women, it's known, actively sought these positions. In a world that offered them virtually no economic power, renting out their own bodies was one of the few ways to accumulate capital. For you, in this hut, the academic distinction is meaningless. It feels like choosing between two different kinds of heartbreak. Elodie is at the door. Think on it, she says softly. The agent leaves the day after tomorrow. A chance like this won't come again. She closes the door, and you are once again alone in the dim quiet. But everything has changed. The good news she delivered feels like a poison. The silence is no longer peaceful. It's filled with the deafening sound of a choice you don't want to make. Beside you, your son stirs and lets out a soft, whimpering cry. It's the same sound you heard an hour ago. But now, it sounds like an accusation. The candle has burned down to a greasy puddle, and the hut is now cloaked in a deep, trade-on gloom. Sleep has been a stranger to you. Every time you closed your eyes, you saw two paths diverging in a dark wood. One path leads to a warm, firelit nursery, a full belly, and a purse heavy with coins. The other path leads, well, it leads here, to this hut, to the gnawing uncertainty of winter, to the constant, low-grade fear of watching your child fade from hunger or sickness. Your husband returned hours ago. You told him Elodie's news in a flat, emotional his voice. He sat on the edge of the bed, his back to you, silent for a long time. The smell of sweat and earth clung to him. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. It is a lot of money. He didn't look at you. He didn't mean to. In his words, you heard the surrender, the reluctant acceptance that this was the only way. The decision, it seems, has been made for you by the simple, brutal arithmetic of poverty. Now, in the cold silence, you have to face the consequence of that decision. What do you do with your own child? The answer is a whispered, dreaded word in the villages of 18th century France: mise en our rice, sending him away to a wet nurse. It's a bitter, cruel irony. To earn money by nursing a stranger's child, you must pay another, poorer woman a fraction of your earnings to nurse your own. It was a cascading system of necessity, a pyramid of maternal sacrifice where the poorest woman was at the bottom, often caring for multiple infants for a pittance. You know what this means. You've heard the stories. The women who take in these babies are not like the professional, well-fed nurses destined for noble houses. They are often the most destitute widows or wives of landless laborers, living in even more squalid conditions than your own. They take on several babies at once to make ends meet, stretching their own milk and their attention impossibly thin. The most common and devastating practice was spoon feeding. The nurse would chew a mouthful of bread or grain to a pulp, creating a crude porridge called pat-pat, and then force it into the infant's mouth with a dirty finger or a spoon. Or worse, they would use a poulite, a mixture of flour and water or cow's milk, often soured, served from a filthy cloth or a primitive feeding bottle. This wasn't just less nutritious than breast milk, it was a death sentence, without modern sterilization. These methods introduced a host of bacteria directly into the baby's fragile digestive system, leading to chronic diarrhea, the dreaded wasting sickness or gastroenteritis that would carry away countless infants. There's a strange, almost unbelievable historical artifact that illustrates this grim reality: the infant feeding pot. Some were made of earthenware, others of pewter. They looked like tiny, flattened teapots with a spout. The idea was to pour cow's milk or gruel into them, but they were impossible to clean properly. Inside, milk residue would curdle and fester, becoming a breeding ground for lethal bacteria. They were, in essence, beautifully crafted instruments of death, and they've been found in archaeological digs across Europe. They are a haunting testament to a time when the desire to find a breast milk substitute was met with a deadly lack of understanding about hygiene and microbiology. You try not to picture it. Your son, your tiny, perfect son, in a crowded, dirty room with other crying babies. You try not to imagine him being fed from a sailcloth by a woman too overwhelmed to care if he chokes. You try not to think about the statistics you know by heart, the ones whispered between mothers at the village well, that of the babies sent away. More than half do not see their first birthday. Some estimates from the period suggest the mortality rate in these informal baby farms could be as high as 75 or even 90%. Historians continue to debate the full extent of this tragedy. Was it intentional neglect, a form of socially accepted infanticide driven by desperation, or was it simply the inevitable outcome of poverty, ignorance of hygiene, and a system that treated the children of the poor as disposable? Some scholars argue that the line between the two was blurry, a demographic sinkhole that society tacitly accepted. The authorities were aware of the problem, but the system was too entrenched, too vital to the economy and the convenience of the upper classes, to be truly reformed. You run a finger over your baby's cheek. It's so soft. This choice isn't about the paths anymore. It feels like a sacrifice, a human sacrifice. You are being asked to place your own child on the altar of survival, to save the rest of your family. You are trading one life for the potential of another. Your husband is snoring softly, a rattling sound in his chest. He has escaped into the oblivion of sleep. For you, there is no escape. You hold your child close, trying to memorize the weight of him in your arms, the unique scent of his skin, the feel of his downy hair against your chin. You are drinking in these last moments, storing them up like a squirrel hoarding nuts for a long, empty winter. You know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that this might be the last time you hold him like this. The milk in your breasts, which should be his lifeline, has just become the price of his departure. It is a currency made of your own body, and the cost of spending it is a piece of your soul. The sun is a weak, watery smear in the grey sky when you leave. The air is cold and bites at your exposed skin, a stark contrast to the stifling closeness of the hut. You've bundled your son as warmly as you can in best scraps of wool you own. He is a small, quiet weight in your arms. Your husband stands awkwardly at the door, his face impassive. He presses a small, crudely carved wooden bird into your hand. For the boy, he mutters, not meeting your eyes. It's a clumsy, heartbreaking gesture. There are no tears, no grand farewells. Grief, in your world, is a private, silent burden. You walk to Anadia's cottage. She is taking your son. Not for long, just for a few days. You paid her with the last of your meager savings. It's a temporary measure, a way to hide him, the agent, the many you are. cannot know you've just given birth. Your milk is for the Marquis's child now. To admit you have a baby of your own is to be disqualified immediately. It's the first of many deceptions you'll have to perform. Handing your son over to Kennedy feels like a rehearsal for the real, final separation. Your arms feel unnaturally light and empty as you walk away. You don't look back. The journey to the market town where the agent is waiting is only a few miles, but it feels like crossing a continent. You've never been further than your own village. The path is a muddy track, rutted by cart wheels. The world you know is one of fields, trees, and the familiar faces of your neighbors. No, the landscape is alien. You see other women on the road, all walking in the same direction, their faces set with the same mixture of hope and trepidation. They are your competition. You arrive at the town square, a chaotic jumble of noise and smells. There are merchants shouting, chickens squawking, the clanging of a blacksmith's hammer. It's overwhelming. The agent has set up his office in a room at the local inn. You follow the small stream of women heading towards it. The inn smells of stale beer, sawdust, and unwashed bodies. You huddle in a dark, crowded corridor with the others, waiting your turn. You can hear the agent's booming voice from behind the closed door. You smooth down your simple wool dress, suddenly self-conscious. You pinch your cheeks, trying to bring some color to them, trying to look the part of a healthy, robust country girl. This migration of wet nurses from the countryside to the city was a massive, organized phenomenon. Paris, in the late 18th century, was a vortex, pulling in thousands of young mothers from surrounding regions like Burgundy and Normandy every year. These regions became known as nursing provinces. For a young woman in a poor village, becoming a NRI Salou and live-in wet nurse in the city was seen as a genuine opportunity, a form of social and economic advancement. It was a strange sort of lottery, one where the winning ticket was a healthy postpartum body. Finally, the door opens and a dejected-looking woman shuffles out, her eyes on the floor. It's your turn. You take a deep breath and step inside. The room is small. The agent is a large, fleshy man with a florid face and small, shrewd eyes. HUS sitting behind a table, a ledger and ink pot in front of him. He looks you up and down, his gaze lingering, making you feel like a piece of meat on a butcher's slab. Name he barks. You tell him. Age, 20. Husband's occupation, tenant farmer. He grunts, making a note in his ledger. He asks about your family's health. If there's any history of consumption or SCR of EULA, then comes the physical inspection. He tells you to turn around, to show him your hands, to open your mouth so he can inspect your teeth and gums. Good teeth were considered a sign of a strong constitution. Dental hygiene was, to put it mildly, not a priority for the rural poor. Having a full set of relatively healthy teeth was a significant advantage. This belief, while not entirely scientific, wasn't completely baseless. Severe gum disease and tooth decay could be indicators of underlying illnesses, like scurvy or syphilis, which could indeed be passed to the infant. He seems satisfied. You look strong, he concedes. Good country store. There's a curious detail that historians have pieced together from records and anecdotal evidence: the idealization of the rural nurse. There was a prevailing, romanticized notion among the urban elite that country women were inherently healthier, purer, and more morally sound than their city-dwelling counterparts. City air was considered corrupting, filled with miasmas and disease. Country air, by contrast, was pure and invigorating. Therefore, a nurse fresh from the countryside would provide milk that was not just physically, but morally, superior. It was a fantasy. Of course, a way for the aristocracy to justify a system built on exploitation. They weren't just buying milk, they were buying a rustic, wholesome ideal. The agent makes a final note, then looks at you. You have a child. His voice is casual, but his eyes are sharp as a hawk's. The lie sits heavy on your tongue. No, Sir, my baby. It was born still. A month ago. You look down at your hands, hoping he can't see the tremor in them. He grunts again. It's a common story, a convenient one. Whether he believes you or not is impossible to say. Historians are still divided on how much these agents and even the families knew or chose to know. Was it a don't ask, don't tell policy? Did they prefer the comforting lie to the inconvenient truth of a living, abandoned child? The consensus leans towards a willful ignorance. Acknowledging your baby's existence would introduce a moral complication, a flicker of guilt they'd rather avoid. Your lie is a service you provide them, making the transaction cleaner. Be at the coaching inn at dawn. The carriage for Paris leaves then. Don't be late. He dismisses you with a wave of his hand. You stumble back out into the noise of the town square, your heart hammering against your ribs. You've done it. You've passed the first test. You've sold them a story. And in doing so, you've taken the first real step away from your old life, and away from your son. The city of Paris, once a distant myth, is now your destination. The pre-dawn air is sharp and cold, so cold it feels like breathing in tiny shards of glass. You stand with a small group of other women in the muddy courtyard of the coaching inn, your breath plumbing in the darkness. You're all huddled together, less for warmth and more for a kind of silent, shared reassurance. You are the chosen ones, the ones who passed inspection. You are now, officially, human commodities awaiting shipment. A stable hand comes out with a lantern, its yellow light dancing across your anxious faces. In the flickering glow, you size each other up. There's a girl who can't be more than 16, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. There's a sturdy, stoic woman in her late 20s who looks like she's done this before. You're all dressed in your best, but best in your world is still just coarse, homespun wool, patched and faded. The carriage arrives, a huge, numbering beast pulled by 4 horses. It's not the elegant, spun carriage of a nobleman. It's a public coach, a coach d'eau, basically a giant wooden box on wheels, designed to cram as many paying passengers inside as possible. The agent herds you towards it. There's no ceremony, no kindness. You are cargo. You clamber inside, finding a space on a hard wooden bench. The interior is dark and smells of damp straw and stale sweat. The doors are shut, and with a lurch and a groan, the carriage begins to move. Its iron-rimmed wheels crashing over the cobblestones. The journey to Paris has begun. Inside the carriage, a strange hierarchy quickly establishes itself. The women who have done this before, the veterans, are a source of information. They speak in low tones, sharing tips and warnings. Don't let the mistress see you cry. One says, they think sadness sours the milk. Eat everything they give you. Even if you don't like it, adds another. They watch you like hawks. And whatever you do, the stoic woman chimes in, her voice firm. Don't get too attached to the baby. This was the core of the psychological contract. You were not a mother. You were eternity. Your role was biological, not emotional. To show maternal affection for your child was to cross a line, to challenge the position of the biological mother. It was a performance you had to master, a show of gentle, placid care, devoid of the fierce, possessive love of a real mother. The journey is a miserable, rattling ordeal. The roads are terrible, little more than deeply rutted dirt tracks. The carriage sways and jolts, throwing you against your neighbors. There are no stops for comfort. You eat the stale bread and hard cheese you brought with you, and you learn to sleep sitting up, your head lolling with the motion of the coach. Hours blur into a monotonous rhythm of rattling wheels and creaking wood. You stare out the small, grimy window at the passing countryside. It's the same landscape you've known your whole life: fields, forests, small villages, but seen from this moving box, it feels like a foreign country. With every mile, you are leaving your old self further and further behind. This journey was the first stage in a process of transformation. You were being removed from your context, your community, your family. In Paris, you would be an outsider, isolated and entirely dependent on your employer. This isolation was a key component of the system. A nurse with no local connections was less likely to cause trouble, to complain, or to try and run away. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the landscape begins to change. The fields give way to more and more houses. The road becomes wider and more crowded. You see carts, wagons, men on horseback. Even a few elegant carriages that glide past your lumbering coach. The air itself changes, growing thicker, filled with a miasma of smoke, sewage, and the press of thousands of human beings. You are entering Paris. The city is a century assault. The noise is a constant, deafening roar, the clatter of wheels on stone, the shouts of street vendors, the ringing of 100 church bells, and the smell. It's indescribable. A rich, foul stew of open sewers, rotting garbage, animal dung, and expensive perfume, all mixed together. For a girl from the clean, quiet countryside, it's both terrifying and intoxicating. The carriage rumbles through a maze of narrow, winding streets. The buildings are so tall they seem to lean in and block out the sky. The sheer number of people is dizzying. You see finely dressed ladies with powdered wigs, beggars in rags, soldiers in uniform, priests in black cassocks. It's a world you couldn't have imagined. The coach finally clatters to a halt in a large, noisy courtyard. This is it, the end of the line. You and the other women are herded out into the chaos. The agent is there, shouting instructions. You are not going directly to your new homes. First, you must be officially processed. You are taken to a building. This is the Bureau of Wet Nurses, Bureau des Recommandations, a state-sanctioned agency that was, for all intents and purposes, a clearinghouse for human beings. It was established in the mid-18th century in an attempt to regulate the chaotic and often deadly trade in wet nurses and foster babies, while its stated goal was to ensure quality and reduce infant mortality. It also formalized the commodification of women's bodies. Here, in this bureau, you are no longer a person. You are a product. You will be inspected again, this time by a doctor. Your name will be entered into a ledger, alongside your physical description, your home village, and the name of your future employer. You will be given a number, a tag of sorts. There's a strange and chillingly bureaucratic term for this process that historians have found in the archives. You are being registered as a milk-bearing animal. It's a dehumanizing label, but it accurately reflects how the system saw you, a biological resource to be managed, catalogued, and deployed. You stand in another line, in another dimly lit room, waiting for your final assessment. The excitement you may have felt has evaporated, replaced by a cold, clinical reality. You are a quality milk source, and you are now officially for sale. The price has been agreed upon. All that remains is the final delivery. The room where you wait is stark and intimidating. It's cleaner than the inn, with whitewashed walls and a faint, sharp smell of vinegar, used for cleaning. But the cleanliness feels cold, clinical, not comforting. You sit on a hard bench against the wall, shoulder to shoulder with the other women from the carriage. No one speaks. The weight of what is about to happen has silenced you all. A man in a dark coat with a stern face calls your name. It's your turn. You walk into an adjoining room. Your wooden clogs loud on the bare floor. The room is dominated by a large window, which floods the space with a harsh, unforgiving light. A man is standing there. Not the agent, but a physician. HES dressed in the professional black of his trade, with a pristine white cravat at his neck. He looks at you not as a person, but as a problem to be diagnosed. He doesn't introduce himself. He simply picks up a chart and begins the examination. It's a repeat of what the agent did in the village, but far more so, more invasive. He feels the glands in your neck, peers into your eyes and ears. He makes you open your mouth again, but this time he uses a small metal instrument to poke at your gums. His face inches from yours. Then he listens to your chest, pressing his ear directly against your back and then your chest, telling you to breathe deeply. The stethoscope had been invented by this point, a simple wooden tube, created by René Laennec in 1816, but its use was far from universal. Many physicians still preferred the old, direct method of oscillation. For you, the feeling of this stranger's head pressed against your body is yet another layer of humiliation in a day already full of it. He is checking for any sign of consumption tuberculosis, which was rampant and deeply feared. A fever, a shadow of illness could mean immediate disqualification. Then, he gets to the heart of the matter, your milk. He asks you to express some onto a spoon. He studies it intently, looking at the color. It should be a pure, opaque white, not bluish or watery. He might even taste it. This was a common diagnostic technique. The milk of a good nurse was expected to be sweet. A salty or bitter taste was considered a sign of poor health or bad humors. He's operating based on a medical framework that, to us, seems like a bizarre mix of keen observation and pure fantasy. The dominant medical theory of the day was still rooted in the ancient Greek concept of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A person's health and temperament were determined by the balance of these fluids. A good nurse needed to be sanguine, dominated by blood that is, cheerful, robust, and calm. Her milk would reflect this perfect balance. A melancholic woman, too much black bile would produce milk that was thick, sour, and could cause depression and digestive issues in the infant. A choleric, or angry woman, too much yellow bile would have agitated or heated milk that could give the baby colic and fever. These weren't just quaint folk beliefs, they were core tenets of medical science at the time, written about in textbooks and taught in universities. One of the most peculiar and pervasive ideas you would have encountered was the theory of maternal impressions. It was widely believed that a pregnant or nursing woman's thoughts and experiences could directly imprint upon the child. If you, the nurse, saw something frightening, like a snarling dog, the shock could curdle your milk and even cause the baby to develop a fearful disposition or, in some extreme theories, a birthmark shaped like a dog. This is why a calm temperament wasn't just a preference, it was a medical necessity. Your employer would go to great lengths to shield you from any upsetting sights or news. Your emotional state was now part of the service you were paid to maintain. The doctor makes notes on his chart, his face unreadable. HES not just assessing your physical health, HES assessing your moral and emotional fitness based on these strange, pseudoscientific theories. HES looking for the physical manifestation of a good character. Are your cheeks rosy? This points to a sanguine nature. Is your skin clear? A sign of pure humors. Are you plump? A sign of a generous, abundant body. Your entire being is being interpreted through this strange, pseudoscientific lens. Historians often debate how much of this the doctors themselves truly believed, and how much was a performance for their wealthy clients. Was it a genuine, if flawed, scientific effort to protect the infant, or was it a way to create a mystique around their profession, to justify their fees by using complex jargon and elaborate theories? The answer is likely a bit of both. These physicians were men of their time, operating within the accepted scientific paradigm. Yet, they were also catering to the anxieties and prejudices of an elite clientele that wanted every possible assurance that their precious heir was receiving the absolute best. The doctor finally puts down his pen. He gives you a curt nod. "You are acceptable," he says, as if pronouncing a verdict. "The LaFontaine household. They boy, 3 weeks old. You will be collected in the morning." He turns away, already focused on the next chart, the next body to be inspected. You are dismissed. You walk out of the examination room, back into the waiting area. You've passed the final, most rigorous test. You have been medically certified as a high-quality, humanitarian animal. The relief you feel is quickly overshadowed by a profound sense of derealization. You have been measured, prodded, and judged. Your body is no longer your own. It now belongs by order of both commerce and science, to the Lafontaine family. Tomorrow, you will meet the infant whose life you are being paid to sustain, while the life of your own son hangs in a terrifying, unknown balance. You spend the night in a dormitory with the other newly approved nurses. A large, cold room in the upper floor of the bureau building. Sleep is fitful, punctuated by the sounds of women weeping softly in the dark. It's a shared, unspoken grief for the children left behind. The morning brings a grim, grey light and a breakfast of thin gruel and hard bread. There's no conversation. The reality of your situation has settled in. A heavy, indigestible lump. A clerk comes in, calling out names. Marie Dubois, you stand up. For the Lafontaine household. He hands you a small folded paper. It's your contract. You can't read. Of course, very few women of your class could. The literacy rate for women in rural France in the mid-18th century was abysmally low, likely less than 10%. This illiteracy was a powerful tool of control. It meant you were completely dependent on others to interpret official documents for you, documents that dictated the terms of your own life. The clerk reads the key points aloud in a bored, monotone voice. Your name, the name of your employer, Monsieur Etienne Lafontaine, a wealthy textile merchant. The duration of service 18 months, or until the child is weaned, whichever comes first. Your salary 25 livres per month, to be paid in quarterly installments. A final bonus of 50 livres upon successful completion of the contract, contingent on the child being healthy and well grown. He drones on. The contract specifies your duties and restrictions in minute detail. You are to feed the infant on demand. You are to sleep in the nursery with the child. Your diet will be determined by the lady of the house and the family physician. You are forbidden from consuming wine, garlic, or spicy foods, as these are believed to heat the milk. You are not to entertain visitors. You are not to leave the house without permission. And then, the most important clause, the one that underpins the entire arrangement, you are to have no unauthorized contact with your own family. You are, for all intents and purposes, to forget you have another life. This clause was designed to prevent you from getting distracted or, worse, from trying to flee back to your own child if you heard they were sick. There's a fascinating and rather grim detail that legal historians have uncovered in some of these contracts, the penalty clauses. If you broke the contract by getting sick, by being found to have sour milk, or by trying to leave, you would not only forfeit all payment, but your family could be held liable for the cost of finding a replacement nurse. It was a system of indentured servitude, legally binding and almost impossible to escape. The clerk finishes reading. Do you agree to these terms? What can you say? You nod. He dips a quill pen in the inkwell and holds it out to you. Make your mark here. You take the pen. It feels alien in your hand, a tool for a world you don't belong to. You press your thumb into the ink pad he pushes forward, then press it onto the paper next to a wax seal. Your thumbprint. A dark, hold smudge. It's the signature of the illiterate, a mark that is uniquely yours, yet anonymous. With that simple press of your thumb, you have legally transferred the rights to your body and your freedom to the Lafontaine family for the next year and a half. You are not alone in this. This act of signing away your autonomy was the cornerstone of this entire socio-economic structure. Historians still debate the degree of coercion involved. Was it a free contract between two parties legally? Yes, but in reality, when one party is desperate and illiterate, and the other holds all the power, the concept of a free agreement becomes murky. It's a classic example of what some scholars call coerced choice, where the options are so limited that the decision is predetermined by circumstance. Your choice was between this contract and the near certainty of starvation for your family. It wasn't much of a choice at all. A footman in a simple livery arrives to collect you. He doesn't speak to you, just beckons for you to follow. You pick up your small, pathetic bundle of belongings, a change of clothes, the small wooden bird your husband gave you, and follow him out into the bustling streets of Paris. The city is even more overwhelming in the daylight. You walk a few paces behind the footman, a silent, rustic shadow trailing a symbol of wealth. People in the street stare at you. They know exactly what you are. Your country clothes, your robust figure, your slightly dazed expression. You are instantly identifiable as A.N.R. Rice, a fresh arrival from the provinces. You are a walking, talking cliché, an embodiment of the romanticized rural health the city dwellers craved for their children. You feel a blush of shame, but also a flicker of pride. You were chosen. You are worthy. It's a confusing mix of emotions that churns in your gut. You are simultaneously an object of pity and an object of value. The footman leads you away from the noisy, commercial heart of the city into a quieter, more elegant quarter. The streets are wider, cleaner. The buildings are grand stone mansions, with tall windows and ornate iron balconies. This is where the Lafontaines live. A world away from your muddy, one-room hut. A world you purchased with a single incumbrate. You have signed the contract, and now you must deliver on its promise. The footman stops before a large, imposing stone facade. It's not a palace, but to your eyes, it might as well be. The house is 3 stories high, with tall glass windows that glitter in the morning light. The front door is a massive slab of dark, polished wood with a heavy brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Everything about it is designed to communicate wealth, stability, and power. You hesitate on the street, clutching your small bundle. This is it. This is your new home, your new prison. The footman, noticing your pause, gives you an impatient look and knocks sharply on the door. Its wings open almost immediately, revealing a cavernous entryway paved with black and white marble tiles arranged in a dizzying diamond pattern. The air inside smells of beeswax and something else, a faint, floral scent you can't place. A severe-looking woman in a crisp black dress with a starched white apron and cap is waiting. This is the housekeeper. She is the commander-in-chief of the domestic staff, and her expression makes it clear she does not suffer fools. She gives you a single, swift, top-to-bottom glance, and you feel every patch on your dress, every scuff on your shoes. Her look says, "You are not of this world." "You are the nurse?" she asks, her voice cold and clipped. You nod, mumbling, "Yes, madam. Follow me, and wipe your feet thoroughly." You scrape your worn-out clogs on the mat, feeling clumsy and uncivilized. You step inside, and the heavy door closes behind you with a solid, definitive thud. The sound echoes in the grand entryway. It's the sound of a world being shut out. Your world. The housekeeper leads you through the house. You move in a state of stunned silence. You've never seen such splendor. There are gleaming wooden floors covered with thick, colorful carpets that swallow the sound of your footsteps. The walls are covered in silk wallpaper or dark wood paneling. Gilded mirrors reflect your dark, frightened image back at you. Paintings in heavy gold frames depict stern-faced ancestors and serene landscapes. It's a museum of wealth, and you are the single, jarringly out-of-place exhibit. This was the experience of thousands of raw women. The sheer culture shock of being thrust from profound poverty into the heart of aristocratic or bourgeois luxury was immense. Everything was alien: the food, the clothes, the language, the social codes. A simple thing like using a knife and fork, something you've never done, was a potential source of deep shame and ridicule. The house is a hive of activity, but it's a quiet, disciplined activity. You see other servants' maids in crisp uniforms, footmen in livery moving silently and efficiently through the hallways. They avert their eyes as you pass. They know their place. You, however, are an anomaly. You are a servant, yes, but of a very particular and peculiar kind. Your position in the household hierarchy is ambiguous, and you will have to learn its unwritten rules very quickly. The housekeeper leads you up a grand, curving staircase. The polished wood of the banister is smooth and cool beneath your rough hand. on the second floor. She opens the door and gestures for you to enter. This is the nursery. This will be your domain. The nursery is the warmest, brightest room you've seen yet. A fire crackles cheerfully in a small marble fireplace. Sunlight streams through a large window overlooking a manicured garden. The room is filled with things you can't even name. There's a beautifully carved wooden cradle draped in fine white lace. A chest of drawers is piled high with soft linen and woolen clothes for the baby. There are even toys, a polished wooden horse. The silver rattle items of such casual, thoughtless expense they make your head spin. A small, simple bed is tucked into one corner of the room. It has a proper mattress, sheets, and a thick woolen blanket. That is your bed. The housekeeper says, "You will sleep here. You will not leave the nursery or the child without my, or Madame S, express permission." Her tone is a clear warning. You are not here to enjoy the luxury. You are here to work, and your work is centered entirely on the small, precious object in that lace-draped cradle. In the world of the 18th century elite, the nursery was a world apart. It was a female-dominated space, often located in a separate wing of the house. The master of the house would rarely set foot in it. It was the domain of the mother, the nurse, and the infant. But this proximity also meant you would be under constant, unblinking scrutiny. Every cry the baby made, every ounce of weight it gained or lost, would be attributed to you and the quality of your care. There's a curious architectural detail that some historians point to the listening to. In some very wealthy homes, a primitive intercom system, a simple tube running through the walls, connected the nursery to the mistress's bedroom. It allowed the mother to listen in on the nursery at any time, to monitor the nurse and the baby without being physically present. It's a perfect architectural metaphor for your situation. You are given a position of immense responsibility, but you are never truly trusted. The housekeeper looks you over one last time. Madame Lafontaine will be in to see you shortly. And the child, she turns and leaves, closing the door softly behind her, leaving you alone in the opulent, sunlit room. You stand in the middle of the thick carpet, your small bundle of belongings feeling impossibly shabby. You are a ghost from another life, haunting this place of impossible wealth. You can smell the money in the air, a mixture of beeswax, clean linen, and privilege. You have stepped through the looking glass into a world that operates by rules you don't understand, and you know, with a chilling certainty, that there is no going back, not for a long, long time. The silence in the nursery is profound, a stark contrast to the constant, low-level noise of your life in the country. There, silence was simply the absence of human activity here. It feels like a presence, a heavy, luxurious blanket. You stand awkwardly in the middle of the room, not daring to touch anything. You are an intruder in this pristine, gilded cage. The door opens again, this time with a soft click rather than the housekeeper's brisk efficiency. A woman enters. She is younger than you expected, perhaps in her mid-20s, and exquisitely dressed in a gown of shimmering blue silk. Her hair is powdered and thoughtfully arranged, and a delicate scent of violets follows her into the room. This is Madame Helene Lafontaine, the mother of the child you are here to feed. She doesn't look at you at first. Her eyes go straight to the cradle. She moves towards it with a rustle of silk, a vision of effortless elegance. She gazes down at the sleeping infant, a soft, proprietary smile on her face. Then, as if suddenly remembering you exist, she turns her attention to you. Her eyes, a cool, appraising grey, sweep over you. It's the same look the agent and the doctor gave you, but different. Theirs was a look of commerce, of assessing livestock. Hers is a look of evaluation. She is measuring you, not just for health, but for suitability, for your place in her world. You are the new nurse, she says. Her voice is light and melodious, but there's an unmistakable edge of authority to it. You curtsy, a clumsy, self-conscious bob that you practiced in your head on the journey here. Yes, madame. The doctor from the bureau spoke highly of your constitution. She continues, her gaze still fixed on you. He says you are of a calm and placid temperament. I trust he is correct. My son requires tranquility. She is making it clear from the outset your emotions are a condition of your employment. Your job is to be a source of calm, a human tranquilizer. Any sign of your own inner turmoil or grief, your fear, your loneliness is unprofessional. It is a contamination she will not tolerate in her nursery. You understand your duties, she says, phrasing it as a statement, not a question. Your only concern is the well-being of my son, Jean-Pierre. You will feed him. You will care for him. You will keep him clean and quiet. You are here to provide a service. You are not his mother. The words are spoken quietly, without malice, but they land like a slap. You are not his mother. It is the fundamental rule of your new existence. This role you are about to perform, one of the most intimate acts a woman can engage in, must be stripped of the emotion that naturally accompanies it. You are a vessel, a function, a biological necessity hired to perform a task she is unwilling or unable to perform herself. The complex relationship between the mother and the wet nurse is a subject of endless fascination for historians and psychologists. It was a relationship fraught with inherent tension, jealousy, and social anxiety. The mother, the mère de famille, held all the social and economic power. But you, the nurse, held a different kind of power, a biological, intimate power. You would spend more time with her child than she would. Your body would nourish him. His first bond, his first attachment, would likely be to you. This created a deep-seated anxiety for the aristocratic mother. She feared the infant would become more attached to you. She feared that your coarse peasant blood, your simple peasant ways, would somehow pass through the milk and corrupt her noble child, that he might grow up with your accent or, worse, your common sensibilities. To mitigate this, she had to constantly reinforce the social distance between you. The rule you are not his mother was as much for her own reassurance as it was a command to you. There's a strange and telling custom from this period, the ceremonial presentation. Often, when guests came to visit, the baby would be brought out for display, not by the mother, but by the beautifully dressed wet nurse. You would be part of the tableau, a living symbol of the family's wealth and their commitment to their child's health. You were, in a sense, a prized possession, like a fine horse or a piece of porcelain. But you were always an object, never a participant. Madame Lafontaine gestures for you to come closer to the cradle. He will wake soon. He will be hungry. You approached timidly, your rough wool dress seeming to shrink in the presence of her silk. You look down into the cradle. The baby is swaddled in fine, soft linen, a world away from the coarse cloth you wrapped your own son in. He is beautiful, with a dusting of fine dark hair and a perfect, rosebud mouth. He looks well-fed, firm, safe. A wave of conflicting emotions washes over you. There is a professional pride, a sense of purpose. This is your charge, your responsibility. But there is also a deep, aching void, a phantom limb of grief for the child you left behind. This baby, sleeping peacefully in his luxurious cradle, is the reason your own son is in a far more precarious situation. Your name is Marie, is it not? Madame Lafontaine asks, pulling your attention back. Yes, madame. Very well. Marie, from this moment on, your life is here, in this room, with him. She gives one last, long look at her son, then turns and glides out of the room, her silk dress whispering behind her. The scent of violets lingers. You are left alone with the sleeping baby in the stock. Unequivocal command: you can give him your milk, your time, your body, but you cannot give him your love. You are not his mother. As if on cue, a small noise emanates from the cradle. A soft sigh, then a little whimper. The baby, Jean-Pierre, is waking up. His tiny face, which had been so serene in sleep, begins to crumple. His mouth opens. Under thin, demanding cry fills the silent room. It's a sound you know intimately, a universal signal that cuts through class, race, and circumstance. It's the cry of hunger. You move to the cradle, your hands feeling clumsy, your heart pounding. This is the moment. The first time. You gently lift the baby from his soft cocoon of linen and lace. He is heavier than you expect, solid and dense with good feeding. He feels different from your own son. Your baby was a weary, fragile creature. This child feels like a different species, a creature of milk and honey. He roots against your chest, his head bobbing frantically, his cries growing more insistent. He doesn't care that you're a stranger, that you smell of the rodent of poverty. He only cares about the primal, biological promise your body represents. You sit down on a small wooden chair near the fire, a chair clearly designated for this purpose. You unlace the front of your rough bodice, your movement stiff and self-conscious. This act, which with your own child was a natural, unthinking gesture of love, now feels like a performance, a duty. You are keenly aware that at any moment, the door could open, Madame Lafontaine, or the housekeeper, could be watching. You guide the baby to your breast. He latches on immediately, with a strength that surprises you. His frantic cries subside, replaced by a rhythmic, contented suckling. A wave of profound and deeply confusing sensations washes over you. There is the physical sensation, the familiar pull, the release of pressure. Your body responds on instinct, doing what it is designed to do. But woven through the physical relief is a tangle of emotions so complex you can't begin to unravel them. There is a surge of something that feels dangerously like tenderness. He is just a baby, after all, helpless and innocent. As you hold him, feel his small, warm body against yours. A biological bond begins to form, whether you want it to or not. This is the great, unspoken paradox of your profession. You are instructed to remain detached. But the very hormones your body releases during lactation, oxytocin and prolactin, are designed to promote bonding and maternal feelings. You are fighting against your own biology. Then, there is the guilt. It's a sharp, stabbing pain in your chest. Every drop of milk this child takes is a drop your own son is not getting. You picture him in your mind's eye, in Elodie-esque. Is he hungry right now? Is he crying for you? The thought is a physical agony. You are here, in this warm, luxurious room, feeding a stranger's child, while your own baby is, somewhere else, in danger. And it's your fault. This internal conflict was the hidden, personal cost of the wet nursing system. While aristocrats and doctors debated the qualities of milk, you and thousands of women like you were living with the daily, grinding trauma of this forced maternal schism. You look down at the baby in your arms. His eyes are closed, his small fists clenched in concentration. He is entirely absorbed in the act of feeding, of surviving. In this moment, he is just a baby. He is not a symbol of class oppression or a source of your pain. He is simply a small, hungry creature, and you are the source of his comfort and his life. There's a strange historical detail that highlights the intimacy of this relationship. In many wealthy households, the wet nurse would be responsible for a practice called pre-mastication. When the baby was old enough for solid foods, it was the nurse, not the mother, who would chew the food into a soft pulp before feeding it to the infant, mouth to mouth or with a finger. It seems unhygienic and shocking to us, but it was a common practice. It meant that your saliva, your very essence, was mixed with the child's first food. It was an act of profound, almost animalistic intimacy that stood in stark contrast to the formal, emotional distance you were supposed to maintain. Historians have long debated the long-term psychological impact of this system on the children. What was it like to spend the first 1 or 2 years of your life bonded to one maternal figure, only to be abruptly separated from her when you were weaned? Some scholars, drawing on attachment theory, suggest that this early separation could have caused lasting emotional trauma, a sense of loss and abandonment that shaped the child's entire life. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the famous 18th-century philosopher and the fierce critic of wet nursing, argued that this mercenary form of motherhood broke the natural chain of affection and created emotionally stunted adults. He himself was a product of this system, and his writings are filled with a sense of personal grievance. The baby, Jean-Pierre, finishes feeding. His body goes limp and heavy with satisfaction, and a milky sigh escapes his lips. He is asleep. You hold him for a moment longer, your cheek resting against the top of his head. You breathe in his scent, a mixture of milk, clean linen, and that unique, sweet smell of a baby. Through a heartbeat, you allow yourself to forget. You forget the contract. You forget Madame Lafontaine. You forget your own aching heart. In this quiet moment, in this warm room, you are just a woman holding a sleeping child. It's a fragile, fleeting peace, a stolen moment of connection in a world built on separation. You know it can't last, but right now, it's enough. You gently place him back in the cradle, tucking the fine blankets around him. Your first duty is done. Your life quickly settles into a monotonous, highly regulated rhythm, dictated by the needs of a tiny tyrant in a lace-trimmed cradle. Your world shrinks to the four walls of the nursery. You wake when Jean-Pierre wakes. You sleep when he sleeps, which is to say, you rarely get more than an hour or two of uninterrupted rest. Your days are a repeating cycle of feeding, burping, changing, and rocking. You exist in a strange social limbo within the household. You are not one of the regular servants, who sleep in cramped dormitories in the attic and eat their meals together in a noisy kitchen. You sleep in the nursery, and your meals are brought to you on a tray. This isn't a privilege, it's a form of quarantine. You are kept separate, your health and diet meticulously controlled for the sake of your precious milk. The other servants treat you with a curious mixture of deference and resentment. On one hand, you have direct, intimate access to the air of the house. You don't have to scrub floors or haul water. In their eyes, you have a soft job. On the other hand, they know you are temporary. You are a biological tool, hired for a specific purpose. And once that purpose is fulfilled, you will be gone. They are the permanent fixtures of this world you are just passing through. This created a unique social hierarchy. In the complex ecosystem of a large 18th-century household, the wet nurse occupied a special, and often isolated, position. She often had a better wardrobe than the other maids, as the family would provide her with clean, presentable dresses, sometimes even a specific uniform to ensure she looked the part of a wholesome caregiver. This visible marker of favor could easily breed jealousy. A young kitchen maid, a girl named Cecile who brings you your meals, is your only real point of contact with the downstairs world. She is weary and sharp-eyed, and she watches you with an undisguised curiosity. She tells you stories of the household, of the master's tempers and the mistress's vanities, of the feuds and flirtations among the staff. She is your window onto the world outside the nursery door. But even this connection is fraught with peril. The housekeeper, Madame Dubois, sees everything. You learn quickly to be discreet. A casual friendship could be seen as a distraction, a potential source of gossip or contamination. You are supposed to be a serene, placid vessel, untroubled by the petty dramas of the servants' hall. The supervision is constant and suffocating. Madame Lafontaine visits the nursery twice a day, at precisely 10 in the morning and 6 in the evening. She never stays long. She comes to inspect, not to bond. She'll check the baby's linens, peer at his skin for any sign of a rash, and ask you a series of pointed questions. Did he sleep well? How was his digestion? Is he fretful? Your answers must always be reassuring. To admit the baby had a bad night or a bout of colic would be to admit a failure in your own body. A flaw in the product you are providing, you learn to choose your words carefully, to present a picture of perfect, milky harmony. This constant surveillance was rooted in deep-seated fears. The most terrifying was the fear of the overlaying nurse. This was the nightmare scenario for any parent who hired a wet nurse, that you, in your exhaustion, would roll over in your sleep and suffocate the infant. While tragically this did happen, It was also often used as a convenient excuse to cover up other causes of infant death, like disease or congenital defects. To prevent it, some nurseries had a cage or a separate, barred-off section for the nurse's bed, physically separating her from the cradle. There's even a bizarre historical curiosity known as an arcuchio, a sort of arched frame placed over the baby in the bed, designed to prevent the nurse from rolling onto them. It looks like a tiny, personal prison for the infant. Even more insidious was the fear of a nurse secretly substituting her own sickly child for the healthy noble infant, a trope that appeared in sensationalist pamphlets and folk tales of the time. While there is little to no historical evidence this ever actually happened, the fear was real. It speaks to the deep-class anxieties of the era, the terror that the corrupt blood of the lower classes could literally usurp the place of the legitimate heir. Historians are still debating the origins of this particular panic. Was it a genuine, if irrational, fear, or was it a form of propaganda to justify the extreme control exerted over nurses? You are living in a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. You can look out the nursery window and see the beautiful, manicured garden below. You see ladies and gentlemen strolling along the gravel paths, laughing and talking. You are a prisoner watching a party to which you will never be invited. The loneliness is a physical presence, a constant ache in your chest that you must hide behind a placid, professional nurse. Your only companion is a baby who cannot speak, and your only real human contact is with people who see you not as a person, but as a functionary, a special kind of servant whose very body is on loan. Your diet becomes a subject of intense and obsessive focus for the Lafontaine household. You are not just eating for one, you are eating for the future of the Lafontaine lineage. Every meal that arrives on your tray has been carefully vetted, designed not for your pleasure, but for its perceived effect on your milk. Breakfast is a thick pottage of oats or barley, sometimes with a raw egg stirred in for strength. Lunch is the main meal of the day, a slab of boiled beef or chicken, a portion of bread, white bread, a luxury you've never had before, and a pile of burned, boiled vegetables. Dinner is a lighter affair, usually a thick soup and more bread. It's more food, and of a far better quality, than you have ever eaten in your life. You should be grateful, but the food is bland, unseasoned, and repetitive. The family physician has left a long list of forbidden items. No wine or cider alcohol was believed to heat the blood and sour the milk. No garlic, onions, or strong herbs. Their pungent qualities were thought to pass directly into the milk and give the baby colic. No cabbage or beans, for the same reason. No pork, which was considered too greasy and difficult to digest. No spicy food of any kind. Your palate is being systematically neutralized. This dietary regulation was based on the humoral theory you encountered at the bureau. The goal was to produce milk that was perfectly balanced, temperate. The ideal diet for a nurse was a major topic of discussion in the medical texts of the 18th century. Doctors would write entire chapters on the subject, debating the merits of certain foods. For instance, chicken was considered a light and pure meat, perfect for a nurse. Beef was good for building strong milk. Green vegetables were generally approved of, but root vegetables were sometimes seen as too earthy. It was a strange mix of empirical observation and pure superstition. And for you, it is a constant reminder that your body is not your own. You crave the simple, hearty flavors of home, a piece of salty cured ham, a stew rich with garlic and herbs. But these are now forbidden pleasures, potential contaminants that could harm your precious charge. One of the most surprising and, from a modern perspective, worrying prescriptions was for beer. While wine was often forbidden, many physicians recommended that wet nurses drink copious amounts of small beer, the low-alcohol brew. It was believed to be nutritious, hydrating, and to increase milk production. In an age when water was often contaminated and unsafe to drink, beer was a safer, calorie-rich alternative. So you might find yourself prescribed several pints of beer a day, a medical order that seems bizarre to us now. The Lafontaine household takes this very seriously. Madame Lafontaine herself might inspect your leftover food to make sure you've eaten everything. The housekeeper will question Cecile, the kitchen maid, about your appetite. A loss of appetite is a red flag, a sign of potential illness or even worse, melancholy. You learn to eat what you are given, to swallow the bland, boring food without complaint. You are, in a very real sense, being fattened like a prize animal. The goal is to keep you robust, placid, and productive. Your body is a machine for converting food into milk, and the LaFontaine's are determined to provide it with the highest quality fuel. But this carefully curated diet creates a cruel and painful irony. While you are eating better than ever before, you are racked with anxiety about your own son. You know the food he is likely getting, if HES even getting breast milk at all. HES probably being fed the dreaded BOULIE, the watery flour and milk mixture, or the pre-chewed pap, while you are consuming boiled chicken and white bread to create perfect milk for Jean-Pierre. Your own child is likely suffering from malnutrition and digestive distress. The contrast is a form of daily torture. Every bite you take feels like a betrayal. The food that is meant to strengthen you feels like it's poisoning your soul. Historians still debate how aware the employing families were of this disparity. Did Madame LaFontaine ever stop to think about what your child was eating? The consensus is probably not. The existence of your child was an inconvenient truth, one that was deliberately and systematically ignored. It was easier to believe the story you told the agent that your child was born still. It made the entire transaction cleaner, morally simpler. To acknowledge that your child was alive and likely starving while you were fattening hers would be to acknowledge the brutal reality of the class system they sat atop. It was a truth they paid good money not to see. One afternoon, Cecile brings your lunch tray. Tucked under the napkin is a small, lumpy apple. It's against the rules. It's not on your prescribed diet. Cecile gives you a quick, conspiratorial wink and scurries away before you can say anything. You hold the apple in your hand. It's a simple, illicit pleasure, a taste of something real and forbidden. You bite into it, and the sharp, sweet, acidic flavor explodes in your mouth. It's the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. It's a small act of rebellion, a tiny assertion of your own desires in a life that is completely controlled. But as you swallow, the guilt returns, sharp and familiar. This apple, this tiny moment of joy, is a luxury your own son will never know. Weeks turn into a month, then two. The rhythm of your life in the nursery becomes a kind of trance. You move through your days on autopilot, a ghost in a machine of maternal care. But while your body is in Paris, your mind is miles away, in a dusty, impoverished village, haunted by a question you dare not speak aloud. What has become of your son? You left him in the care of Elodie, your neighbor. But that was only a temporary arrangement, to get you past the agent's inspection. Before you left, you had to make the real, long-term arrangement. Through a series of whispered, desperate negotiations, you found a woman in a village several miles from your own, a widow named Agatha. You never met her. The arrangement was made through a third party, a cousin of your husband's. You paid her a small sum in advance, a fraction of your first month's wages, sent via a traveling merchant to take your baby in. This was the grim reality. Your child was sent to NR Rice, just as you were NR Rice. But the two worlds couldn't be more different. The place where your son is now, this informal foster home, was part of a vast, unregulated network that historians and contemporaries grimly referred to as baby farms, maisons d'NR Rices. These were not farms in any pastoral sense. They were dumping grounds for the inconvenient children of the poor. A single woman, usually a destitute widow, might take in 3, 2, even 5 or more infants at once to scrape together a meager existence. The conditions were almost universally appalling. Imagine a tiny, dark, one-room hut, just like yours, but even more crowded and squalid. Multiple infants, often sick and malnourished, would be crammed together. Hygiene was non-existent. The air would be thick with the stench of sickness and unwashed linens. The infants were often left in their swaddling for days at a time, leading to horrific skin sores and infections. The primary cause of death was nutritional neglect. The foster mother, or motherhood, had too many mouths to feed and not enough milk of her own, if she was lactating at all, so she would rely on the cheapest, easiest alternatives: the watery gruel, the pre-chewed bread, the sow cow's milk served from a filthy rag or a pewter-feeding pot. It was a recipe for lethal gastroenteritis. The babies would waste away from chronic diarrhea and dehydration. This was a dirty secret that everyone knew about, but few were willing to confront. The mortality rates were catastrophic in some areas of France. Police reports and parish records from the period paint a horrifying picture. It was not uncommon for a baby farm to be a literal death sentence. One infamous report from a Paris police lieutenant in the 1782 described these places as veritable slaughterhouses. He noted that of the 21 Darrow babies born in Paris annually, around 17 Darrow were sent out to the country to be nursed. Of those, only a few thousand ever returned. Why did this system persist? The reasons are complex. For the urban authorities, it was a way to outsource the problem of poverty and illegitimate births. For the parents, women like you, it was a choice born of utter desperation. And for the motherhood, the foster mother, it was one of the few ways a destitute woman could earn any money at all. She was not necessarily a monster. She was often just another victim of the same grinding poverty, trapped in an impossible situation. Historians still struggle to understand the mindset of the parents who sent their children to these places. Did they know how high the risks were? The answer is a difficult yes. While they might not have known the precise statistics, the stories, the whispers, the mothers who returned home to an empty cradle were a part of village life. It was a gamble, a desperate, long-shot gamble that their child might be one of the lucky few to survive. They were playing a grim lottery where the prize was simply their child's life. There's a particularly heartbreaking detail that emerges from the archives: the use of soothing syrups to keep the constantly crying, hungry infants quiet. These foster mothers would often resort to giving them crude opiates. Mixtures containing laudanum, opium tincture, or poppy head tea were cheap and readily available. They would effectively drug the babies into a stupor, making them quiet and easier to manage. Of course, these concoctions were addictive, suppressed the appetite, and an overdose was easy and tragically common. The quiet in the baby farm was often not the quiet of contentment, but the quiet of sedation, or worse. Use it in the wrong, sunlit nursery in Paris, rocking a healthy, plump baby. You listen to his steady, even breathing, and you are consumed by a vision of his dark mirror, your own son, lying in a dirty corner, perhaps drugged into silence, slowly starving. The contrast is so violent, so unjust, that it feels like a physical tear in the fabric of your soul. You have to force the images from your mind, push them down into a deep, dark place, or you wouldn't be able to function. You wouldn't be able to put on the placid, smiling face that Madame Lafontaine pays for. The truth of the baby farm is a horror you must live with every single day, a secret poison that taints every moment of your comfortable, gilded captivity. Time in the Lafontaine household is measured in feedings and sleep cycles, a blur of identical days. But outside the nursery walls, the world continues, and news, even in this controlled environment, has a way of seeping through the cracks. Your only source is Cecile, the kitchen maid, who smuggles in gossip along with your meals. But the news you crave, the only news that matters, is news of home. It comes, when it comes at all, in the form of a letter. Not for you, of course. For you, a letter is a useless object, a collection of symbols you can't decipher. The letter is for your husband, sent to the Lafontaine's address with instructions for it to be passed to you. It arrives after weeks on the road, passed from one traveler to another. A fragile, dog-eared messenger from a world you can barely remember. Getting the letter is one thing, reading it is another. You have to wait for a moment of opportunity, a time when both the housekeeper and Madame Lafontaine are out. Then, with a knot of dread in your stomach, you have to find someone you can trust to read it to you. Your first choice is Cecile. You wait until she brings your evening meal, your heart thumping against your ribs. You whisper, your voice trembling slightly. Can you read? She looks at you, her sharp eyes taking in your desperate expression. She hesitates. To be caught helping you in this way could mean trouble for her. A severe scolding or even dismissal. But she sees the wrong aid in your face. She gives a curt, nervous nod. You pull the crumpled letter from its hiding place in your mattress. You unfold it carefully. It's a single sheet of cheap paper, covered in your husband's clumsy, barely formed letters. He has learned to write his name and a few basic words, a skill HES immensely proud of, but it's a struggle for him. You and Cecile huddle by the firelight, the sleeping form of Jean-Pierre and his cradle just a few feet away. Cecile squints at the paper, her finger tracing the words as she slowly, painstakingly sounds them out. My dearest, Marie, she begins. The sound of your name, spoken from your husband's hand, is a physical blow. I hope this finds you in health. The letter is short, just a few simple sentences. The harvest was poor again. His brother's cow is sick. The landlord raised the rent. It's a litany of the small, grinding hardships that make up his life, and yours. And then, the part you've been reading. Cecile's voice drops even lower. About the boy, the woman, I guess, she says. Yes, wait, he cries. Much. Here's wait. He cries much. The words are a punch to the gut. They are simple, unadorned, but they contain a world of terror. Weak is a death sentence in your world. It means HES not thriving. It means the watery gruel and the lack of care are taking their toll. He cries much means he is hungry. He is in pain. He is lonely. It means he is still fighting. But for how long? You feel a wave of nausea, and the room seems to tilt. You have to steady yourself against the wall. Cecile looks at you with pity in her eyes. She has seen this before. Every nurse from the country lives in fear of a letter like this. This method of communication a barely literate husband, a semi-literate servant as a go-between was the reality for countless women. It was a fraught, unreliable system. A letter could be lost. The reader could make a mistake, and the writer, your husband, might be trying to protect you, softening the blow. His weak could be a euphemism for something far, far worse. You have no way of knowing the full truth. You are trapped in a prison of ignorance, forced to piece together a picture of your child's fate from these tiny, terrifying scraps of information. The historical record is filled with the tragic echoes of these letters. Some archives contain letters from nurses, dictated to professional scribes, begging their employers for a few days' leave to go home and check on their own sick child. These requests were almost always denied. You were under contract. Your duty was to the child you were paid to nurse. Your own child's fate was an externality, a personal problem the contract was designed to ignore. Some historians argue that this enforced separation and the trickle of bad news was a form of psychological torture. Albeit an unintentional one, it created a state of constant, low-grade anxiety and dread. It was a pain you had to carry in silence. If you were to show your grief, if you were to weep in the nursery, Madame Lafontaine would see it as a breach of contract. Your sadness could sour the milk and harm her son. You are being paid to be placid, and so you must swallow your terror and despair. Push it down deep where no one can see it. Cecile refolds the letter and hands it back to you. I'm sorry, Marie, she whispers. It's a small, human gesture of kindness in a system that is profoundly unkind. You take the letter, your hands trembling. You tuck it back into your mattress, but it's no longer just a piece of paper. It's a toxic object, a source of radioactive dread that will now live in your bed with you. You go to the window and look out at the dark, manicured garden of the Lofontaine mansion. You are in a palace of comfort, but your heart is in a hovel miles away, with a weak, crying baby you are powerless to help. The bad news has arrived, and it has left you utterly, terrifyingly alone. The bad news from home acts like a slow poison, seeping into the corners of your carefully constructed peace. Every time Jean-Pierre cries, you hear an echo of your own son's imagined weeping. Every time you feel the satisfying weight of the healthy baby in your arms, you are struck by the phantom lightness of the one who is wasting away. Your placid demeanor, the one you are paid to maintain, becomes a heavier and heavier mask to wear. But your own hidden grief is not the only source of anxiety in the nursery. There is another fear. A fear that is spoken of in hushed tones. A fear that binds you and your wealthy employers together in a terrifying intimacy. It is the fear of disease. In an age before germ theory, the mechanisms of contagion were poorly understood, shrouded in superstition and the language of miasmas and bad humors. But one thing was known with terrifying certainty: some illnesses could be passed from a nurse to a baby through her milk. And the most feared of all was syphilis. Syphilis, or the Great Pox, was a rampant and devastating disease in 18th-century Europe. It cut across all social classes, but its transmission was a source of profound class anxiety for the aristocracy. While a nobleman might contract the disease from a liaison, it was the potential for it to be passed to his legitimate heir through a low-born wet nurse that was the stuff of nightmares. It represented a physical contamination of the bloodline. The fear was not unfounded. Congenital syphilis, passed from mother to infant, was a tragic reality, and it was also understood that the disease could be transmitted through the milk of an infected nurse. The lesions that could appear in a nursing mother's mouth or on her breast were highly infectious, and a baby could easily contract the disease during feeding. Because of this, the initial physical inspection you endured was, in large part, a hunt for any sign of the pox. The doctor checked your skin, your throat, your gums, looking for the telltale chancres, rashes, or sores. But the disease had long latency periods, and a woman could be infectious without showing any obvious symptoms. The system was relying on a visual inspection to detect an often invisible enemy. Now, living in the house, the fear cuts both ways. You are terrified of an illness in the house. If little Jean-Pierre were to fall ill with a fever or a rash, you would be the first person blamed. Your milk would be seen as the immediate culprit, the source of the poison. It wouldn't matter if the child had been exposed to a dozen other people. You, the outsider, the rustic vessel, are the most likely source of contamination in their minds. A sick baby could mean your immediate dismissal, without pay, and a reputation that would make it impossible to ever find work again. But you also live in fear of what the baby, and by extension, his family, might transmit to you. Syphilis was not just a disease of the poor. The Lofontaine family, for all their wealth and piety, were not immune. What if the child had contracted it congenitally? What if you were to catch it from him? For you, a diagnosis of syphilis would be more than a death sentence. It would be a mark of profound social shame that would follow you back to your village and ostracize you completely. This mutual suspicion created a strange, tense dynamic. You are constantly, subtly observing the baby for any sign of illness, a skin blemish, a persistent cough, and you know that you are being observed with the same intensity. This fear of tainted milk led to some truly bizarre and tragic historical episodes. One of the most infamous is the epidemic of breasts in France in the 1762. A rumor swept through the region that a specific syndicate of wet nurses was spreading syphilis. It caused mass panic. Nurses were rounded up, subjected to humiliating public inspections, and many were imprisoned or driven from their homes based on flimsy evidence and hysteria. Historians who have studied this event are still debating its cause. Was there a genuine outbreak, or was it a case of mass hysteria fueled by class prejudice and a deep-seated fear of the unclean rural? The consensus is that it was likely a moral panic. where common childhood ailments like eczema or impetigo were misdiagnosed as signs of the Great Pox. You are living in the shadow of this kind of panic. One day, you notice a small, reddish patch on Jean-Pierre's cheek. It's probably just a bit of chafing from his linen. A mill crashed, but your blood runs cold. You spend the day in a state of quiet terror, dabbing the spot with cool water, praying it will disappear. You watch Madame Lafontaine's eyes during her evening visit, terrified she will notice it. Your mind races. Is it a sign of sickness? Is it your fault? Could this be the beginning of the end? Thankfully, by the next morning, the patch has faded. You breathe a silent, shaky sigh of relief. It was nothing, but the incident leaves you shaken. It's a stark reminder that you are walking a tightrope. You are locked in a biological embrace with this child, a relationship of profound intimacy, but it is an intimacy laced with the invisible threat of disease. A killer that could pass between you and a single drop of milk, destroying both your lives in the process. Days in the nursery are long, and in the quiet moments while Jean-Pierre sleeps, you have a lot of time to think. As you sit in the comfortable chair, looking around the opulent room, a question begins to form in your mind. A question that seems both simple and impossibly complex. Why? Why is you, a stranger from a poor village, sitting here feeding this child, while his own mother, a healthy young woman who lives just down the hall, does not? The answer is a tangled web of fashion, social obligation, and deeply ingrained medical prejudice. It's not that Madame Lafontaine is physically incapable of nursing. It's that, for a woman of her class in the 18th century, breastfeeding was seen as inconvenient, unfashionable, and even vaguely animalistic. First, there was the relentless pressure of society and social life. A high society woman's life was a whirlwind of balls, dinners, salon visits, and courtly obligations. Her primary duty, after producing an heir, was to be a beautiful and engaging companion to her husband, a symbol of his wealth and status. Breastfeeding would have been a major impediment to this. It was time-consuming, unpredictable, and physically demanding. A nursing mother couldn't simply leave her baby for an entire evening to attend a soiree. Your presence freed Madame Lafontaine to maintain her demanding social schedule without interruption. Then there was the matter of fashion. The high fashion of the era dictated a rigid, corseted silhouette. Gowns were tightly laced, designed to create a slim, conical torso and a high, pushed-up bust. This was a look completely incompatible with the practical realities of nursing. A nursing mother's breasts change in size and shape. She needs clothing that allows for easy and frequent access to breastfeed. Madame Lafontaine would have had to abandon the very corsets and gowns that signified her status as a fashionable lady. It was, in a very real sense, a choice between being a mother in the biological sense and being a lady in the social sense. For many, the latter was far more important. There's a fascinating, if slightly ridiculous, detail that illustrates this: the fashionable flat chest. For certain periods, particularly in France, a full, maternal bosom was considered rather vulgar and rustic, the kind of figure a peasant or wet nurse like you would have. The ideal aristocratic female form was slender and almost boyish. Breastfeeding, which naturally enlarges the breasts, was seen as ruinous to the figure, a permanent peasantification of a noble body. Beyond the social and aesthetic reasons, there were powerful medical arguments made against maternal breastfeeding, arguments that seem utterly bizarre to us today. Many esteemed physicians of the time actively discouraged it for aristocratic women. They argued that the delicate and highly strung nature of a society lady made her milk inherently inferior. Her life of late nights, rich food, and emotional excitement would produce agitated or weak milk, which could harm the infant. The most peculiar of these theories was the belief that colostrum, the first milk produced after birth, was not just unnecessary, but actually harmful. It was often described in medical texts as impure or stale milk that needed to be purged. Therefore, it was considered best for a newborn to be immediately handed over to a wet nurse whose milk was already in. meaning she had given birth a few weeks prior. This is, of course, the exact opposite of our modern understanding. We know colostrum is a vital liquid gold, packed with antibodies and essential nutrients. But in the 18th century, it was seen as a poison to be avoided. Historians are still debating the motivations behind this medical advice. Were the doctors genuinely convinced by these theories, or were they simply catering to the desires of their wealthy clients, providing them with a convenient medical excuse to avoid a task they found burdensome? The philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, in his famous treatise A Meal on Education, certainly thought it was the latter. He launched a blistering attack on the French aristocracy, accusing them of being unnatural mothers who outsourced their most sacred duty out of vanity and selfishness. He championed maternal breastfeeding as the foundation of a healthy family and a moral society. His writings were hugely influential and helped to slowly spark a maternal revival towards the end of the century. But for most of your era, the wet nurse remained the norm for the elite. So, as you sit in the nursery, you begin to understand. Madame Lafontaine's refusal to nurse is not a simple act of rejection. It is a calculated decision, reinforced by her doctor, her dressmaker, her husband, and her entire social circle. She is adhering to the expectations of her class. Her body is an ornament, a symbol of status. Your body is a utility, a tool for production. The system that has brought you here is designed to maintain that exact distinction. She is the lady, you are the mammal. And in the world of 18th century Paris, that is the natural order of things. One afternoon, a well-dressed man arrives at the house to speak with Madame Lafontaine. Cécile tells you later that he was an inspector from the Paris Wet Nurse Bureau, the very same institution that processed you upon your arrival. His visit is a routine checkup, a part of the city's vast, bureaucratic attempt to manage the river of milk flowing from the countryside into the nurseries of the capital. As you rock Jean-Pierre, you think back to that imposing building. The ledgers, the doctors. You realize you are not just an employee of the Lafontaine family. You are a cog in a much larger machine, an immense, state-sanctioned enterprise. The Paris Wet Nurse Bureau des Recommandations was a unique and fascinating institution, a testament to the sheer scale of the wet nursing industry. It was officially established by the Lieutenant General of Police in 1716. Though less formal versions had existed before, its creation was a response to a full-blown crisis. Infant mortality in Paris was skyrocketing, and much of the blame was placed on the chaotic, unregulated market for wet nurses and the horrors of the baby farms where Parisian babies were sent. The Bureau was intended to be a solution. Its goal was to professionalize and sanitize the trade. It acted as a centralized employment agency, connecting families with registered, inspected nurses. On paper, it was a model of enlightenment, a rational administration, applying principles of order and scientific scrutiny to a social problem. Would a family like the Lafontaines needed a nurse, they wouldn't just hire someone off the street. They would apply to the Bureau. The Bureau would then provide them with a selection of candidates, women like you, who had already been vetted by the many URS in the provinces and then re-inspected by the Bureau's own physicians in Paris. The Bureau set the standard wages, drew up the contracts, and kept detailed records of every placement. This created a massive database of human capital. The ledgers of the Bureau, some of which survive today, are a historian's treasure trove. They contain thousands of entries, each one a miniature portrait of a woman's life, her name, her age, her village of origin, her physical description, and the outcome of her placement. They are a stark, bureaucratic record of this immense traffic in maternal labor. But the Bureau's oversight didn't stop once you were placed. The inspector's visit to the Lafontaine household is proof of that. The Bureau was supposed to conduct regular checks to ensure the nurse was healthy and the baby was thriving. If a baby in the care of a Bureau-registered nurse died, an official inquiry was supposed to be launched. The Bureau also managed the other side of the trade, the flow of urban babies out to the countryside. A Parisian artisan's wife, for example, who needed to work and couldn't afford a live-in nurse, would bring her newborn to the bureau. The bureau would then assign the baby to a registered nurse in the country and NRI's place and would even arrange for its transport in large, designated wagons. It was a system of staggering scale. It's estimated that, as it speak, the bureau was managing the lives of over 20 infants and nurses at any given time. It was, in essence, the largest and most complex human resources department of its day, and its primary commodity was female lactation. However, historians are still debating how effective the bureau actually was. While its intentions may have been noble, the reality was often different. The sheer volume of placements overwhelmed its resources. Inspections could be infrequent or superficial. The physicians, for all their scientific posturing, were still operating with flawed medical knowledge, and crucially, the Bureau had little real power to control what happened in the distant, rural baby farms. Corruption was also an issue, with many US and officials known to take bribes to approve substandard nurses or ignore troubling reports. There's a strange and telling piece of administrative trivia about the Bureau: the Certificate of Good Health. When your contract was over and the child was successfully weaned, your employer would sign a document testifying to your good service and the child's health. The certificate, issued by the Bureau, was like a letter of recommendation. It was a valuable asset, proof that you were a reliable and high-quality nurse, which would make it much easier for you to find another position in the future. For some women, this became a career. They would move from one placement to the next, spending years of their lives nursing other women's children, their own families and lives a distant memory. The inspector's visit reminds you that you are being watched, not just by the family, but by the state. You are a registered asset, a numbered entry in a ledger. Your body and its functions are a matter of public administration. This realization is both comforting and deeply unsettling. On one hand, there is a system in place, a set of rules that theoretically offers you some protection. On the other hand, it reinforces your status as a commodity. You are not Marie Dubois, a woman from a small village. You are Nurse Chisasan, a biological unit leased to the Lafontaine family, under the supervision of the Paris police. As the months wear on, a subtle but undeniable shift occurs in the nursery. Jean-Pierre is no longer a passive, swaddled lump. He is growing, developing a personality. He learns to smile, and his first smiles are for you. He learns to grasp, and his tiny fingers wrap around your rough, work ruins when he is frightened by a loud noise or a strange face. It is to you that he turns, burying his face in the familiar comfort of your shoulder. You are his world, his source of food, his source of comfort, his constant companion. The bond that your employers and your own sense of self-preservation tried to prevent is forming anyway, as silent and inexorable as a rising tide. And with this bond comes a new and dangerous dynamic: a silent and declared rivalry with the baby's mother, Madame Lafontaine. She is still the architect of his life, the owner of the nursery, the one who holds your fate in her hands. But you are the center of his universe, and she knows it. Her twice daily visits to the nursery become more charged. You can feel her watching you, her cool grey eyes missing nothing. She observes the way the baby's eyes follow you around the room. She hears him gurgle with pleasure when you speak to him and the soft, nonsensical babble of a caregiver. One afternoon, she comes into the nursery while you are feeding him. She watches the scene for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Jean-Pierre is in your lap, blissfully content. He seems very attached to you, she says. The words are neutral, but the undertone is not. It's not a compliment. It's an observation laced with a thread of suspicion, of jealousy. You murmur a non-committal response, looking down at the baby, trying to make yourself smaller, less significant. You know you are on dangerous ground. This silent power struggle between the mother and the wet nurse was a common feature of the aristocratic household. It was a triangle of anxieties. The mother feared being displaced in her child's affections. You, the nurse, feared the mother's jealousy and the potential loss of your position, and caught in the middle was the infant, whose primary attachment was being formed with a woman who was destined to disappear from his life. The competition could manifest in subtle ways. Madame Lafontaine might start to contradict your methods, questioning the way you swaddle him or the lullabies you sing. She might buy him a new, expensive toy, a silver rattle, and make a great show of giving it to him herself, a way of asserting her maternal role through material possessions. There is a fascinating and poignant historical artifact that speaks to this rivalry: the portrait. It was common for wealthy families to commission portraits of their infants. Sometimes, the baby would be painted in the mother's arms, but just as often, if not more so, the baby would be painted in the arms of the wet nurse. These portraits are complex documents. On one hand, they celebrate the healthy, thriving heir and the wholesome, rustic nurse who sustained him. The nurse is often depicted as rosy-cheeked and plump, a symbol of fecundity, but she is always dressed in simpler clothes, her gaze often directed at the baby, while the baby might look out at the viewer. The true subject of the painting. The mother's presence is asserted by her absence. She is the one who paid for the painting, the one who owned both the child and, in a sense, the nurse. Historians who study these portraits are still debating their meaning. Are they a genuine tribute to the nurse's vital role, or are they a subtle way of reinforcing the class structure, of showing the nurse as a prized, but ultimately subordinate part of the household's assets? The answer is likely both. They are a snapshot of a complex emotional and social reality. For you, the rivalry is not an academic puzzle, it's a daily source of stress. You start to perform a careful balancing act. When Madame Lafontaine is in the room, you try to be more reserved, to handle the baby with a kind of professional detachment. You let her be the one to elicit a smile or a coo. You fade into the background, trying to make yourself as unobtrusive as the furniture. But when you are alone, the bond is undeniable. You whisper stories to him from your village. You sing him the same rough, simple lullabies your own mother sang to you. You give him a piece of yourself, a piece of your world, that his mother could never provide. It's a small, secret rebellion, a way of asserting your own humanity in a role that tries to reduce you to a mere function. The tension comes to a head one evening. Jean-Pierre has a slight fever and is fretful and crying. You have been up with him all day, rocking him, singing to him, doing everything you can to soothe him. When Madame Lafontaine comes for her evening visit, the baby is wailing. She rushes to the cradle, her face a mask of anxiety. She picks him up, but he continues to cry, arching his back and reaching out his little arms, not for her, but for you. In that moment, everything is laid bare. The child, in his distress, seeks the comfort he knows best. He seeks you. Madame Lafontaine's face hardens. She thrusts the crying baby back into your arms. See to him, she says, her voice as cold and sharp as ice. She turns and sweeps out of the room without another word. You have won the battle for the baby's affection, but in doing so, you may have just lost them all. You have exposed the fragile fiction of her motherhood and highlighted your own indispensable role, and that has made you dangerous. The fever passes, as most childhood fevers do. Within a day, Jean-Pierre is back to his cheerful, gurgling self. But the chill left by Madame Lafontaine's anger lingers in the nursery. The atmosphere has changed. The fragile truce has been broken, and you are now walking on eggshells. Every coo from the baby, every smile he directs at you, feels like a potential spark in a room filled with gunpowder. A week later, your worst fears are realized. Jean-Pierre develops a cough. It starts as a small, dry tickle, but within a few days, it becomes a deeper, more persistent rasp that shakes his small frame. He grows listless, his appetite wanes, and a fever returns, this time higher than before. Panic descends upon the Lafontaine household. A sick heir is the ultimate crisis, a threat to the family's lineage and future. And in the frantic search for a cause, all eyes turn to one person, you. The family physician is summoned immediately. He arrives in a flurry of self-importance. His face grim. He examines the baby, listening to his chest, peering down his throat. Then, he turns to you. The professional courtesy he showed you at the bureau is gone. His questions are sharp, accusatory. What have you been eating? Have you been outside, spoken to anyone? Are you feeling unwell in any way, ace or throat a chill? It is a full-blown interrogation. You are the prime suspect. The assumption is that the illness must have originated with you. Your body, your milk. Your very presence is now seen as a potential source of poison. You answer his questions truthfully, your voice trembling. You have eaten only what you were given. You have not left the house. You feel perfectly fine. He is not convinced. He takes a sample of your milk, studying its color and consistency, even tasting it, searching for any sign of acrimony or imbalance that could explain the child's condition. The humoral theory, which once certified you as healthy, is now being used to incriminate you. This was the terrible vulnerability of your position. In an age with no understanding of viruses or bacterial infections, illness was often seen as a moral or constitutional failing. When a nursling fell sick, the nurse was the easiest and most logical person to blame. It was a way for the family and their doctor to find a simple answer to a terrifyingly complex problem. It absolved them of any responsibility and reinforced class prejudices. The sickness must have come from the coarse, unhealthy body of the peasant. The historical record is rife with accounts of nurses being summarily dismissed, often without their wages, because their charge fell ill. A letter from one 18th-century physician to a colleague discusses a case of a sick infant, concluding, "The fault lies, as it so often does, with the nurse. Her humors are clearly in a state of agitation. I have advised the family to dismiss her at once and procure a new one of a more placid disposition." The nurse's own health and the scientific reality of the situation were irrelevant. She was a scapegoat. Madame Lafontaine hovers in the background during the physician's examination, her face a mask of controlled panic. Her earlier jealousy has been replaced by a cold, pointed suspicion. She looks at you as if you are a saboteur, a contaminant who has deliberately harmed her child. The fragile, secret bond you had with Jean-Pierre now feels like a liability. Your affection for him could be twisted into a narrative of carelessness or even malice. There's a strange and little-known folk belief that played into this dynamic, the idea of the evil eye aurum of our soil. It was a superstition that lingered even in sophisticated urban households. The belief was that a person, particularly someone who was envious or harbored ill will, could cause sickness and misfortune simply by looking at a child. A nurse who was secretly grieving for her own child, or who felt resentful of her employers, was seen as a potential source of this malevolent energy. Did you, in your secret sadness, somehow wish this illness upon the child? It's an irrational, terrifying thought. But in a world struggling to explain random tragedy, such beliefs could take powerful hold. For 2 days, a tense, fearful quiet hangs over the house. You are confined to the nursery, but you are barely allowed to touch Jean-Pierre. The housekeeper and even Madame Lafontaine herself take over his care, applying cold compresses to his head and trying to spoon-feed him watered-down broth. You are relegated to the corner, a pariah in your own small world, watching helplessly as the baby you have cared for struggles. You feel a confusing mix of emotions. You are terrified for Jean-Pierre. Despite everything, you have come to care for this little boy. His raspy breathing tears at your heart. You are also terrified for yourself. You know that if the worst happens, you will be ruined. You pray for his recovery, not just for his sake, but for your own. On the 3rd day, the fever breaks, the cough begins to ease, the crisis has passed. The physician declares that his prescribed treatments are mild purgative for the baby in distress. Bland diet for you have worked their magic. No one apologizes. No one acknowledges the false accusation that hung over your head. The household simply returns to its normal rhythm, but something has been irrevocably broken. The trust, fragile as it was, is gone completely. You are no longer seen as a wholesome source of life, but as a potential vector of death. You have been reminded, in the crudest way possible, of just how precarious your position is. You are only one cough, one fever, one inexplicable rash away from complete disaster. The house breathes a collective sigh of relief, but it is not a sigh of trust restored. It is the sigh of disaster averted. The episode of Jean-Pierre's illness has changed you in the eyes of the household. You are no longer just the nurse, you are a risk that must be managed. The scrutiny intensifies, but it's no longer just about your physical health. No, your entire demeanor, your very essence, is under constant, unspoken evaluation. You must now embody, in every waking moment, the perfect, idealized portrait of a good nurse. This ideal is a very specific image, a carefully constructed fantasy that the upper classes have created for their own peace of mind. Physically, you are expected to be a picture of rustic vitality. Your cheeks should be rosy, a sign of good, sanguine humor. Your figure should be full, even plump. In an age when the aristocratic ideal for women was a pale, slender fragility, your robustness is your primary virtue. Your body is a walking advertisement for the quality of its product. It must look wholesome, earthy, and endlessly abundant. You are a living symbol of life, a bulwark against the ever-present threat of infant mortality. But the physical portrait is only the beginning. The emotional portrait is far more demanding and far more cruel. A good nurse is placid. She is serene. She is endlessly patient. Her temperament should be as smooth and temperate as her milk is supposed to be. She does not have moods. She does not have worries. She certainly does not have sorrows. Your own grief, the constant, aching void left by your absent son, is a contamination that must be hidden at all costs. To show sadness would be a professional failure. They believe your melancholy could pass through your milk, infecting their child with a gloomy disposition. Your tears could literally sour the milk, so you learn to swallow them. You learn to build a wall inside yourself. And on the outside of that wall, you paint a mural of contentment. You perfect a soft, placid smile. You cultivate a gentle, soothing tone of voice. You become an actress in a play of one, performing the role of a happy, simple caregiver. To help you fit this image, Madame Lafontaine provides you with new clothes. Not the rough, patched wool you arrived in, but several dresses of a simple, sturdy, dark blue linen, with clean white aprons and caps. It is not an act of kindness. It's an act of stagecraft. It's a costume. You are being dressed for the part of the good nurse. The uniform makes you look neat, respectable, and less like the impoverished, desperate woman you actually are. It distances you from your own identity and reinforces your role within the household. This performance is a constant, exhausting effort. You live in a state of hypervigilance, monitoring your own expressions, your own tone of voice. This constant emotional labor is, perhaps, the hardest part of your job. It's a subject that historians still grapple with. What was the psychological cost of this relentless performance? Did these women, over time, begin to internalize the role? Did the mask ever become the face? A form of psychic survival. A way to forget the unbearable reality of this situation. Some scholars, looking at the formulaic, almost emotional as language in the few surviving letters from nurses, argue that this emotional suppression was a necessary coping mechanism. Others contend that the inner turmoil was always there, a silent rebellion of the heart against the placid facade, and that the performance was a source of constant, grinding stress. You learn about the rules of this performance through harsh experience. One afternoon, Cecile, the kitchen maid, whispers to you that a letter has arrived for you, but the housekeeper intercepted it. Madame Dubois, the housekeeper, informs you later, in a cold voice, that the family has decided it is unwise for you to receive correspondence directly. It is a distraction and could contain upsetting news. From now on, any letters will be held and given to you at a suitable time. You are being officially insulated from your own life, for the good of their child. The cruelty of this is staggering. They are not just controlling your body and your diet, they are controlling your access to hope and to grief. They are trying to sculpt you into the perfect, unfeeling automaton of care their ideal requires. You are not a woman with a family and a past, you are the LaFontaine's nurse. A creature whose only function is to be a source of calm, warm milk. One evening, after you've put Jean-Pierre to bed, you catch a reflection in the dark glass of the nursery window. For a moment, you don't recognize the person looking back at you. You see a plump, placid-looking woman in a neat blue dress and a white cap. Her face is smooth and troubled. She looks healthy. She looks trustworthy. She looks like a stranger. The real you. The grieving, terrified Marie from a small, muddy village, is nowhere to be seen. She is buried so deep inside this carefully crafted portrait that you are no longer sure you can find her yourself. Time, which once seemed to stretch before you in an endless, monotonous expanse, suddenly begins to accelerate. The catalyst for this change is Jean-Pierre himself. He is no longer an infant. He is a toddler. He learns to crawl, then to pull himself up on the furniture, then to take his first shaky, triumphant steps. His world expands beyond your arms, beyond the confines of his cradle. The nursery, once his entire universe, is now a playroom to be explored. His babbling solidifies into his first words. One of them, to Madame LaFontaine's mixed delight and chagrin, is Marie. With each of these developmental milestones, a small, cold knot of dread tightens in your stomach, because with each step he takes, with each new food he learns to eat, he is moving further away from his need for you. Your primary function, the very reason for your existence in this house, is becoming obsolete. The day of weaning is no longer a distant abstraction. It is a rapidly approaching reality. The process of weaning in the 18th century was not the gentle, child-led transition we often think of today. It could be an abrupt and sometimes brutal affair. The age of weaning varied, but for a child of a wealthy family, it typically happened between 18 and 24 months. The decision was not yours to make. It would be made by Madame LaFontaine, in consultation with the family physician. One day, the physician comes for a visit. This time, he doesn't look at you with suspicion. He barely looks at you at all. His focus is entirely on Jean-Pierre. He examines the boy's teeth, checks his weight and height, and declares him a fine, sturdy specimen. He turns to Madame LaFontaine and announces, "He is ready. We may begin the process of weaning." The words hang in the air from Madame LaFontaine. They are a declaration of success, the successful completion of a project. For you, they are the sound of a countdown timer reaching zero. You're about to be made redundant. The methods for weaning were varied. Sometimes it was a gradual process of introducing more and more solid foods while reducing the frequency of breastfeeding. But often, a more abrupt method was favored, designed to make the breast unappealing to the child. There was a rather grim folk practice, sometimes even recommended by physicians, of applying a bitter substance to the nurse's nipples. Things like mustard paste or a bitter extract of wormwood were used. The idea was to make the child reject the breast out of disgust, a form of negative reinforcement that seems incredibly cruel from a modern perspective. This practice highlights the perception of the child's attachment. It wasn't seen as a healthy bond to be gently transitioned, but as a habit to be broken, like a vice. The emotional trauma this could cause for both the child and the nurse was rarely considered. As Jean-Pierre is introduced to more solid foods, soft-cooked vegetables, bread soaked in broth, minced meat, your role begins to shift. You are still his primary caregiver, but the central, biological pillar of your relationship is being dismantled. He nurses less and less. Your body, which for so long has been in a state of high production, begins to respond. It's a slow, uncomfortable process, a biological retreat. The weaning is also a social process. Madame LaFontaine begins to spend more time in the nursery. She takes over the feeding of his solid meals, an act she can perform herself. She makes a concerted effort to re-establish herself as the primary maternal figure. She is reclaiming her son. You watch from the sidelines, your role diminishing daily. The child is confused. He still turns to you for comfort, still tries to nuzzle at your chest for the familiar solace of nursing. And you, following the doctor's orders, have to gently but firmly push him away. It's a betrayal of the very bond you spent the last year and a half building. He doesn't understand. He cries, his face full of confusion and hurt. And you, who have been forbidden from showing your own sorrow, must now be the source of his. It is a unique and refined form of torture. Historians are still debating the full impact of this moment. For the child, attachment theory suggests this abrupt separation from their primary caregiver at a crucial developmental stage could have lifelong consequences, creating a deep-seated sense of insecurity or abandonment. For the nurse, it was a profound and complex loss. You were losing not just a job, but a relationship. A child you had nurtured and, despite all the rules, had come to love. This was followed by the abrupt expulsion from the household, sending you back to a home that may no longer have a place for you. The day finally comes. The physician declares the weaning complete. Jean-Pierre is now fully on a diet of solid food. Your services are no longer required. Madame Lafontaine informs you, in a voice that is polite but distant, that your contract is now concluded. You are to be paid your final wages and your bonus. You will leave in the morning. Just like that. It's over. 18 months of your life. 18 months of your body. 18 months of suppressed grief and silent devotion. All concluded in a single, clinical sentence. You look at Jean-Pierre, playing on the floor with his wooden horse, blissfully unaware that his entire world is about to be upended, that the constant presence in his life is about to vanish forever. The weaning is complete, and you are, once again, just Marie Dubois, a poor woman from the country. The morning of your departure is crisp and clear. The household is already humming with its usual, disciplined activity. But for you, it is a day outside of time. You wake up in your small bed in the nursery for the last time. Jean-Pierre is still sleeping in his cradle, his breathing soft and even. You watch him, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the way his dark eyelashes rest against his skin. A powerful urge to pick him up, to hold him one last time, washes over you, but you resist. The bond is already broken. To reinforce it now would only be a cruelty to both of you. You dress not in the blue linen uniform of the nurse, but in your own bought, patched woolen dress, the one you arrived in. It feels strange, like putting on the skin of a former self. The housekeeper, Madame Dubois, comes to fetch you. She doesn't speak, just gestures for you to follow her downstairs to the master's study, a room you have never entered before. The study is dark and imposing, filled with heavy wood furniture and the smell of leather on dull paper. Monsieur Lafontaine is sitting behind a large, ornate desk. He is a formidable man you have only ever seen in passing. He does not ask you to sit. He gets straight to business. He has a ledger open and a small pile of coins on the desk. He counts them out methodically. This is your final quarter's wages, he says, pushing a small stack of silver livres towards you. And this, he adds, pushing forward a separate, larger pile that includes a few gold louis d'or, is the bonus, as per your contract. The physician is satisfied with the boy's condition. You have fulfilled your duties. You stare at the money. It's more than you have ever seen in one place. It's a life-changing sum. It's the reason you did this. It's the price of your son's gamble for survival. The payment for 18 months of your life. It should feel like a victory, but as you look at the cold, impersonal metal, it feels strangely hollow. You scoop the coins into a small cloth pouch your husband gave you. The weight of it is substantial. This is your generous remuneration, but what was its real value? Economists and historians have tried to calculate the true economic worth of a wet nurse's wages. On the surface, it seems like a good deal. 25 livres a month was a significant sum, far more than a woman could earn in almost any other form of labor. A female farmhand, for instance, might earn less than that in an entire year. So in purely financial terms, you have done very well for your family. This money could pay the rent for several years, buy livestock, and ensure you don't starve. But this calculation ignores the other side of the ledger. You must subtract the fee you had to pay for your own child's care at the baby farm. This fee, while smaller than your wage, would have consumed a significant portion of it. Then there is the immense, uncontrovertible cost, the risk, and often the reality, of your own child's death. How do you put a price on that? There's also the question of whether you were even paid fairly for the value you provided. You were not just providing food. You were providing a specialized, high-risk service. You were ensuring the survival of a noble heir, an asset of incalculable value to a family like the Lafontaines. In modern economic terms, the value added by your labor was immense. Yet, your compensation was a tiny fraction of the family's wealth. The system was designed to capture the vast majority of that value for the employer. There's a debate among historians about the long-term economic impact of this money on the nurses' families. Did it really lift them out of poverty in some cases? Yes. A nurse's earnings could be the seed capital that allowed a family to buy a small plot of land and become independent farmers. But for many others, the money was quickly swallowed up by debts, bad harvests, or family emergencies. It was often a temporary reprieve, not a permanent solution. The structural poverty that forced you into this choice in the first place often remain. Monsieur Lafontaine makes a final entry in his ledger and closes it with a decisive snap. The transaction is complete. That is all, he says, dismissing you without looking up. The housekeeper escorts you to the front door. She hands you your small bundle of belongings. There are no words of thanks, no farewells. You were a temporary employee, and your term of service is over. You are now, once again, invisible to them. You step out of the grand house, and the heavy door closes behind you with the same final sounding thud as when you arrive. You are standing on the clean, quiet street of the wealthy quarter, a poor woman in rough clothes, with a heavy pouch of coins and an even heavier heart. You have been paid. You have received your generous reward. But as you stand there, alone in the bright morning sun, you have never felt so poor. The journey home is the reverse of the one that brought you to Paris, but it feels entirely different. The public coach is just as crowded and uncomfortable, the roads just as rutty, but on the way to the city, you were filled with a nervous, hopeful dread. Now, you are just numb. The chaos and noise of Paris recedes behind you, replaced by the familiar green and brown tapestry of the countryside. But it no longer looks like home. It looks like a place you once knew. A lifetime ago. You don't go directly to your village. You can't. Your first stop must be the village where you left your son, the one you have been sending a portion of your wages to for the past 18 months. You have to face the outcome of your gamble. You get off the coach at a crossroads and walk the last few miles. The pouch of coins is a heavy, alien weight against your hip. With every step, your heart beats a harder, more painful rhythm. What will you find? You know the statistics. You've seen the pity in Cecile's eyes. You've read the terror between the lines of your husband's letters. You try to prepare yourself for the worst. But how can anyone prepare for that? You find the cottage of the woman, Aguth. It is smaller and more dilapidated than your own, with a sagging thatch roof and a yard full of mutton chickens. You stand at the door for a long moment, your hand raised to knock, but you can't bring yourself to do it. The door creaks open, and a stooped, wary-looking woman with pale, tired eyes peers out at you. It is Aguth. I am Marie Dubois. You say, your voice a dry whisper, the mother of the boy. She stares at you, her face unreadable. Then she nods slowly and steps aside to let you in. The inside of the hut is dark and smells of damp earth and sickness. In the corner, on a pile of dirty straw, lies a small child. He is not a child. He is a ghost. He is tiny, emaciated. His skin has a pale, bluish tinge, and it is stretched tight over his tiny bones. His eyes are huge in his shrunken face, and they are dull, listless. He is swaddled, but the rags are soiled. He is silent. He is not crying. He is not moving. He is just there, breathing in shallow, rattling gasps. This is your son. The sight of him is a physical blow. The air is knocked from your lungs. The careful numbness you cultivated shatters into a million pieces of pure, undiluted agony. This is the reality of the baby farm. This is the price of Jean-Pierre's rosy cheeks and sturdy limbs. Your milk, your body, your life first went to fatten one child while your own starved. This horrific outcome was tragically common. But what is debated among historians is the emotional aftermath for the mothers. How did women cope with this devastating loss? A loss that was a direct consequence of a choice they made. The historical record is often silent on this point. The grief of poor, illiterate women was rarely documented, but some court records and parish reports give us glimpses. There are accounts of women falling into deep, inconsolable depressions, what was then called melancholia. There are stories of women who were haunted for the rest of their lives by the memory of the child they lost. Some scholars argue that the community, and even religion, provided a framework for this grief. Infant death was so common that there were established rituals and a shared understanding of loss. It was seen as God's will, a tragic but unavoidable part of life. But other historians push back, suggesting that this communal acceptance could also be a form of silencing, a way of preventing a mother's individual, agonizing grief from disrupting the social order. The idea that this was normal did not necessarily make it any less painful. You sink to your knees beside the pile of straw. You reach out a trembling hand and touch his cheek. His skin is cold. You have a pouch full of money, enough to change your family's life, but you would give every last coin. You would give your own life to see a flicker of recognition in his dull eyes, to hear him cry, to have the child you left behind. You have come home, but there is no home here. You paid for your family's survival with your child's life, and you have to live with the knowledge that the payment was accepted. You pick him up, he weighs almost nothing, and hold the frail, dying embers of your son in your arms. The warm, sunlit nursery in Paris. The healthy baby you rocked to sleep. The whole artifice of your life for the past 18 months. It all feels like a hallucination. A cruel dream from which you have just woken up to an unbearable reality. You are back in your world. A world of dirt, flaws, and cold realities. But the home you left is gone forever. You have returned to an emptiness that money can never fill. You do not know how much time passes in that dark, wretched hut. It could be hours, or it could be a lifetime. You hold your son, rocking him gently, humming the lullabies you sang to Jean-Pierre, the lullabies that should have been his. You pour every ounce of your being, every regret, every apology, into this one final, futile act of mothering. He dies in your arms, a quiet, peaceful fading, like a candle flame guttering out. You and your husband bury him in the small churchyard, under a large oak tree. There is a simple wooden cross, with no name. He was never baptized. He never officially existed. He is another forgotten soldier in the silent, centuries-long war against poverty. Your return to the village is a quiet affair. People know. They see it in the emptiness of your arms, in the new, old look in your eyes. They offer quiet condolences, or shared, weary understanding of a grief that is all too common. The money you earned is a strange, tainted presence in your small hut. It buys you a new cow. It repairs the roof. It fills your larder with grain for the winter. It does everything it was supposed to do. It ensures your survival. But the taste of the food it buys is like ash in your mouth. Your life, and the world around you, moves on. And over the next few decades, the very system that shaped and broke your life begins to slowly, inexorably, fall apart. The era of the wet nurse does not end in a single, dramatic moment. It dies a slow death, eroded by a confluence of changing ideas, scientific breakthroughs, and social reform. The first blow is philosophical. The ideas of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which were once radical, begin to seep into the mainstream. His call for natural motherhood and his romanticization of maternal breastfeeding starts to become fashionable among the very elites who once disdained it. To nurse one's own child is no longer seen as rustic or animalistic, but as a sign of enlightened, sentimental parenting. Ladies of the aristocracy begin to see it as a new, virtuous trend. Marie Antoinette herself famously breastfed her own children, an act that caused a sensation and helped to legitimize the practice in high society. The second blow is medical and scientific. The 19th century brings with it a revolution in the understanding of health and disease. The work of scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch introduces the world to germ theory. The old ideas of humus and miasmas begin to crumble, replaced by an understanding of bacteria and hygiene. This has a profound impact on infant care. People begin to understand the importance of sterilization. The deadly and hygienic practices of the baby farms are now seen not just as tragic, but as scientifically preventable. This leads to the third, and perhaps most significant, blow: the invention of reliable and safe artificial feeding. In the mid-19th century, scientists like Justus von Liebig in Germany and later Henry Nessel in Switzerland begin to analyze the chemical composition of breast milk. They developed the first commercially produced infant formulas, made from cow's milk, wheat flour, and sugar. These early formulas are a long way from what we have today, but when combined with the new understanding of sterilization and the invention of hygienic, easily cleanable glass feeding bottles, they offer a viable alternative to wet nursing for the first time in history. The rise of the bottle is a revolution. It frees women from the biological necessity of breastfeeding, whether they are wealthy ladies who want social freedom or poor women who need to work. The demand for wet nurses begins to plummet. The great bureaus close down. The many URS no longer travel the countryside looking for lactating women. The vast, intricate system that commodifies your body and the bodies of thousands of other women simply withers away. Historians still debate the legacy of this transition. On one hand, it undoubtedly saved countless infant lives. The end of the baby farm system and the rise of safe bottle feeding led to a dramatic decline in infant mortality rates. On the other hand, some scholars argue that the shift to formula feeding, especially in its early, aggressive marketing phases, created a new set of problems, devaluing breastfeeding and creating a dependence on commercial products. The debate over breast is best versus the convenience and necessity of formula is, in many ways, an echo of the very dilemmas that defined your life. For you, these grand historical shifts are distant thunder. Your life remains small, quiet, and haunted. You have other children. You nurse them yourself, with a fierce, almost desperate devotion. The money you earned gives them a better start in life than you ever had. They are healthier. They have more to eat. In a way, your sacrifice worked. You broke the cycle of absolute poverty for your family. But every time you look at your healthy, thriving children, you see the ghost of the one who is not there. The era of the wet nurse is over. But for you, it will never truly end. It is a story written on your body and your heart. A silent, personal history of a time when a woman's milk could be both a lifeline and a death sentence. And so, the story ends. The quiet tragedy of one woman's life fades back into the silence of the past. But the journey you've taken through her world leaves behind more than just a lingering sadness. It leaves echoes, and if you listen closely, in the quiet of your own room, in the heart of your own modern world, you can still hear them. The story of the wet nurse is not just a historical curiosity, a strange custom from a bygone era. It is a story about the eternal, tangled relationship between class, money, And motherhood. It's a story about whose bodies are valued and whose are exploited. And that story has never really gone away. It has just changed its clothes. Think about it. The fundamental transaction at the heart of this system, one woman selling her maternal labor to allow another woman to pursue her own life. Whether for social status or economic survival, is still happening all around you. It happens every time a high-powered executive hires a full-time nanny, often an immigrant woman who has left her own children in another country to raise someone else's. It happens in the world of surrogacy, where a woman rents her womb, her entire body, to carry a child for a couple who cannot. The language is now medical and contractual, not humoral and feudal. But the core exchange, the outsourcing of the physical burdens of reproduction from one class of woman to another, is hauntingly familiar. The anxieties, too, have survived. The mommy wars that rage on internet forums and in parenting magazines are a modern, digital echo of the silent struggle in the Lafontaine nursery. The fierce debates over breast versus bottle, the moral judgments attached to a mother's choice, are a continuation of the same obsession with correct mothering. We no longer talk of humors, but we talk of immunological benefits, of IQ points, of bonding. We have replaced one set of pseudo-scientific dogmas with another. A mother who uses formula is still often made to feel a twinge of the same guilt and inadequacy that a selfish aristocratic mother might have been told she should feel. The ideal of the good mother is as tyrannical and unforgiving today as the ideal of the good nurse was in the 18th century. And what about the science? We pride ourselves on having moved past the bizarre theories of sour milk and maternal impressions. But the fear of a contaminated body persists. We scrutinize pregnant and nursing mothers for every sip of wine, every piece of sushi, creating a culture of anxiety that would be recognizable to any physician from the Paris Bureau. We have our own modern, regulated systems for sharing milk, non-profit milk banks that provide screened, pasteurized breast milk for premature and sick infants. It is a life-saving, altruistic system, but it is still a system built on the premise that one woman's body can produce a surplus that another needs. It's the ghost of the Bureau, but with a conscience. Historians will forever debate how to judge the people in this story. Is it fair to label Madame Lafontaine as cruel, when she was simply acting according to the norms and scientific advice of Hurt? And can we condemn your husband for his role in the decision? When he was trapped by a system of crushing poverty, can we even cast Agatha, the baby Salma, as a monster? Or was she just another desperate woman, making an impossible living at the very bottom of a brutal food chain? There are no easy answers. History rarely provides them. The past is not a courtroom where we can hand down clear verdicts. It is a foreign country, and its inhabitants operated by a different set of maps. To understand them is not to forgive them, but to recognize the powerful currents of society, economy, and belief that shape their choices. Your journey through Mary's life was a journey into that farm country. It was a glimpse into the hidden machinery of a world, a look at the personal, human cost of a system that society took for granted. The echoes of that system are a reminder that progress is not always a straight line, and that the questions of whose body matters, whose labor is valued, and what it truly means to be a mother are questions we are still struggling to answer today. The story is over now. The echoes are beginning to fade. Let them go. Let the memory of the cold, stone mansion dissolve into the night. Let the image of the small, muddy hut recede into the mists of history. Marie, Jean-Pierre, the silent, grieving husband, the ghost of the child who was lost, release them all back to the quiet earth where they have rested for centuries. Their time is done. Your journey is over. You have been returned, safe and sound, to the comfort of your own bed. The air in your room is still. The only sounds are the soft hum of a fan, the distant whisper of the world outside your window. Feel the weight of the blanket over you, a gentle, reassuring pressure. There are no more choices to be made tonight. No more contracts to sign. No more sorrows to swallow. There is only this moment of profound peace. The story has done its work. It has carried you across a bridge of time. And now, On the other side, the soft, welcoming landscape of your own dreams awaits. It is time to rest. Let the current of sleep pull you gently away from the shore of wakefulness. Let it carry you into the deep, quiet, and healing dark sleep now. The end of the article. Good night.